Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee of Appropriations budget hearing. Today we have 6 agencies before us. We'll begin with the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. We will begin with our budget analyst, Mr. Connor Brown, followed by the agency representative. I have a Ms. Chanel Johnson, who I assume is here. And so we'll begin with our analyst, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Connor Brown, Policy Analyst with the Department of Legislative Services, here to present the fiscal 2027 budget analysis for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, or MCAAHC. MCAAHC aims to educate Maryland citizens and visitors about African American heritage in the state and oversees the operation of the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum in Annapolis. To begin, on page 1 of the analysis, the fiscal 2027 budget for MCAAHC increases by $133,705, or 7.3%, to $2 million. On page 2, MCAAHC has personnel deficiencies in fiscal 2026 totaling about $70,000, which include shortfalls related to lower than expected vacancy savings. Exhibit 1 shows an overview of agency spending in the fiscal 27 allowance. Approximately 78% of the allowance supports personnel, funding 11 regular positions. Moving on to page 3, Exhibit 2 outlines line item changes in the fiscal 2027 allowance compared to fiscal 2026 after accounting for proposed deficiencies. Personnel expenses increased by around $143,000, primarily due to a decrease in the turnover rate. On page 4 is the personnel section. As of December 31st, 2025, 1 position was vacant and had been vacant for less than 2 months. The key observations section begins at the bottom of page 4 with engagement at the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum. As shown in Exhibit 3 on page 5, in-person visitors to the museum increased by almost 30% in fiscal 2025, reaching about 10,000 visitors. Online engagement, which makes up a much larger share, decreased by about 30%, primarily due to engagement on Facebook. However, this was due to unusually high engagement in fiscal 2024, and the fiscal 25 level of engagement is still higher than prior years. On page 6, Exhibit 4 shows the number of festivals, meetings, and similar events attended by MCAAHC commissioners. In fiscal 2025, commissioners attended 383 events, which is about a 17% increase from fiscal 2024. There were also 2 additional performance indicators that were added in the fiscal 26 Managing for Results submission and are discussed at the bottom of page 6. These include public meeting attendance, which increased by 47% in fiscal 2025, as well as out-of-school program attendance, which increased from 11 students in fiscal 24 to 14 students in fiscal 2025. On page 7 is a discussion of the museum's updated strategic plan, which includes goals around expanding the museum's impact over the next 5 years. By 2030, the museum aims to reach 20,000 visitors per year through on-site and off-site programming, serve 200 students and visitors through educational programs, and increase funding by 15% year over year. MCAAHC should comment on any progress made towards the museum's strategic goals. Also on page 7, the fiscal 2027 capital budget includes a $1 million capital grant to renovate the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum's permanent exhibition honoring African Americans in Maryland. Additional information about this grant will be in the miscellaneous grant program's capital analysis. And then finally, on page 8, DLS concurs with the governor's fiscal 2027 allowance. With that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions of the subcommittee for the budget analyst? Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what's hopefully a quick question on page 5, where you were talking about the in-person and online and talking about how 2025 is down but up from prior years. Do you know anything special that made 2024 such an outlier?
No, 2024 just had Facebook posts that got an unusually high level of engagement.
I think I'll be asking that question again. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions of the budget analyst? All right, seeing none, I'll welcome the agency representative, Ms. Chanel Johnson, the Executive Director of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. Do we have Ms. Johnson present? All right, we'll come back to the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. Moving on, we have next is the State Archives. We'll begin with our budget analyst, Ms. Elizabeth Weibel, followed by the agency representative. The State Archivist is Ms. Elaine Bachman here? Just making sure. All right, thank you. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Weibel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fiscal 2027 budget for the State Archives decreases $1.6 million after accounting for some fiscal 2026 deficiencies to a total of about $12 million. Some of the larger changes this year are to the current year's working budget, as you can see on page 2 of the analysis. When the budget was passed last year, almost all of the entire appropriation was in special funds, and there was a planned reversion of $3 million for fiscal 2025. That was based on the assumption that the archives would be introducing a paywall for accessing land records online in mid to late fiscal 2025. However, following pushback on that plan from some of the biggest users of the site, the plan was scrapped. And so there is included in the deficiencies an $8 million fund swap to replace planned special funds with general funds. There's also a $1.4 million deficiency to address a fiscal 2025 shortfall, and another $1.4 million deficiency for technology and staffing needs. Exhibit 1 on page 3 shows the fiscal 2027 spending breakdown. The overall spending is not that different from prior years. There are the usual increases in personnel and other administrative and maintenance costs. Most of the budget goes toward personnel expenses for maintaining and making available the archival collections. There's also $1.2 million for an offsite warehouse to house some of the collections that are not able to fit in the main building. The agency is responsible for more than 421,000 cubic feet of collections materials and about 195,000 gigabytes of electronic data. Some of the most recent acquisitions include memorabilia from the Pimlico Racecourse, such as administrative records, photographs, and jockey silks. The agency does generate some special funds from providing research assistance and certified copies of records and other things like that, but not nearly enough to cover all of its operating costs. The key observations begin on page 5. They discuss changes in the plans for land record fees. The site maintenance costs for the land records website are currently in the budget covered primarily with general funds. The agency is continuing to explore other sources of ongoing revenue to support the site, whether that's a paywall or perhaps receiving more funding from the Land Records Improvement Fund or another source. Another thing to keep an eye on, the agency is facing a deadline in April for when they need to start making all of their new online records accessible to screen readers and providing things like text descriptions or transcripts. They publish, particularly on the land records site, a lot of records, so the agency is working with DoIT and the Judiciary, which is the source of most of the records, to try and get them in shape for accessible use. They're also looking into perhaps getting an extension on the compliance deadline that would give them additional time to identify the best tools for this. The overall cost of compliance could be around $1 million per year, which is not currently included in the agency's budget, but that is to be determined. Key observation 2 has some information on the agency's collections and public programming. And then the DLS recommendation on page 9 is to concur with the governor's allowance. That concludes my presentation. I can take any questions you have.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions of the subcommittee for the budget analysts? Seeing none, we'll turn now to our state archivist, Ms. Elaine Bachman, and your team. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the subcommittee. I am Elaine Rice-Bachman. I'm the Maryland State Archivist. With me today are Assistant State Archivists Emily Olin Squires and Corey Lewis, and also present is Teresa Foley, who is our Director of Administration. I want to take this moment to publicly thank Emily, Corey, and Teresa for their daily dedication to our agency. If you add up the years of service of each of us in service just to the archives, it's over a century of service to our agency. So I think that speaks to the dedication we have to our agency. I want to thank Elizabeth Wabel for her thoughtful analysis and for always reaching out to us. We do have some fluid budget issues, and we appreciate your attention to that. I also want to thank Jared Rose, our OBA analyst, for the very same reasons, some fluid budget issues, and I think that we really appreciate the support that we're getting to try to fill the gap, as it were. In the absence of any specific comments that were asked of us in relation to our budget, I will refer to my written testimony that I've presented. I hope you will read that. We'll certainly be glad to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'd just like to take this opportunity to address the committee about the work of the archives. This will not be the exciting testimony of last year. I think I must have been the most rewatched testimony of any budget hearing last year, especially for a little independent agency whose entire budget is something like a rounding error for some of the other agencies that you hear from. But a lot of people went back and watched and said, you know, what did the state archivist say? And what I sought was revenue for our agency, for some of the services that we provide, for some users of MD Land Rec, to recoup some of the funding needed to keep what is an essential service available, Maryland Land Records online. Obviously, that created a lot of concern. I'm sure you all heard about it. So did we. What became a 30-day, became a 60-day, became a 90-day window of interaction with stakeholders. We learned a lot from that process. We worked with our partners in the Judiciary, the clerks, to really make a lot of improvements to the already existing Maryland Land Records site, because there's a lot of frustration with having to look at a lot of images. We totally get that. And I think we're on the path to already a far more efficient experience for users. So that was not all a bad situation to be in last year. Obviously, we suspended that plan, but we now are in a position of working very closely with the Senate Subcommittee to seek a sustainable funding for MD Land Rec, so we're grateful for that, and again, grateful for the support of our partners. I have to say that in raising the awareness of what we do, it has brought us a lot of attention. If I weren't out advocating for a sustainable funding source to do that, I would not be doing my job. So in that, I want to say that we continue to engage on that subject. There is continued interest in our ability to set fees. There's a bill out there circulating that would remove the state archivist's right to set fees for any of our services. That includes just like make a copy, some of the certified records that we provide. We do rely on that income. There's an amendment that would rope off land records so that any fee associated with those would have to go through a regulatory process. You know, we're not afraid to engage with stakeholders. As I said, we did it a great deal over the last year. As an agency, we are constantly engaging with the public. I'm just looking at the stats. The number of touch points that we have with the public, including orders, in-person visits, emails, phone calls, exceeds 70,000 a year. So we're very much about engaging with the public. And just a side note about our ability to set fees. If you look at our record of setting fees for our services over the past few years since I've been archivist, all we've done is lower fees, because there are efficiencies that are created with an electronic record system. So we're seeking to make the best user experience for the people who rely on the archives. And, you know, I want to say that I hope that any notion of archives being sort of a dusty attic where records go to die is no longer a part of anybody's talking points for archives. Archives are a dynamic, daily growing service. Our responsibilities get more and more complex every day, frankly. And as more and more records are born electronic, all of those records being created in the agencies, we become the repository for those, the permanent side of those. So some agencies are managing electronic records for a period of time. They come to us and we manage them in perpetuity. That's forever. So it is not a responsibility that is shrinking as records become electronic. It is only growing. And without a robust electronic infrastructure to continue serving those up, it will fail. We will not be able to meet the need. And I just want to make another point, because it's become a popular talking point to say that we were trying to shield records or keep records away from the public or make them inaccessible. That is never the case. Records are always available at the archives. That was never going to change. However, the expectation now among the public, not just for Maryland land records, but for genealogy, you name it, any record we have, the expectation is that you'll be able to access it from home, in the middle of the night, from your car, from your phone. That is a very wide-ranging responsibility. To keep records accessible at that level requires a very robust infrastructure. In comment to something that I really appreciate Elizabeth bringing out in our budget analysis, I'm going to ask Corey to speak to a very specific complexity that is facing us right now. Please read about the ADA Title II compliance issue in our budget, but I would appreciate if Corey could just share why, in particular, because this faces all agencies, all records made public after April 2026 will have to be ADA compliant. It's a particular burden on our agency because we receive everyone else's permanent records. So I'll pass to Corey. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you, Elaine. So as everyone is probably aware, the ADA Title II compliance is a federal law that establishes technical standards to ensure that digital content is accessible to individuals with disabilities. This deadline begins, I believe, in April 24th of 2026. At the State Archives, we face some unparalleled challenges. We manage over 64 public-facing websites. I would say over 1 million web pages within those websites that all must comply with ADA Title II web-compliant accessibility guidelines. We prioritize high traffic sites, and several sites will be classified as archived content. Again, this reduces the overall remediation workload for our IT team. However, MD LandRec presents the most significant challenge. The system receives and processes more than 500,000 land record images monthly. Each one of these images requires accessibility remediation through a hybrid, automated, and manual approach. Now, we have identified the tools necessary to efficiently manage this remediation at scale. However, the lack of sufficient funding to procure and implement these solutions has limited our progress. As a result, we are currently working with our Attorney General to see if we qualify for an undue burden determination under ADA guidelines. I would think under the cost and complexity of the records we're dealing with that we will qualify for that exemption. But having that exemption does not absolve the State Archives of making these records accessible. We will then transition to having to make these records accessible by demand due to the high use of the site. We have acquired permission to hire an accessibility officer, but the volume will be too much for one person to take on. So the acquisition of these tools is certainly paramount to our ability to make these records seamlessly accessible to the public. These deadlines are coming up rapidly. And again, without the sufficient funding, we are really having an issue trying to procure the solutions that we need.
And with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bachman. And to your team, any questions of the subcommittee for our state archivist and her team? Vice Chair Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. Thank you for the work that you are doing, and I appreciated the hearing last year. It was fun. So on page 10, there's an update on the procurement exemption report, and it says that you all don't have a written policy governing exempt procurements. Could you talk to us about what type of procurement would be exempt, and then we could talk about the policy after that?
Sure, and thank you. And we've been working on this. This refers to the Commission on Artistic Property. We do have an internal written policy that we've actually already submitted. It's exempted in the same way that historic preservation services are exempted, in that when a work of art needs to be conserved. It's a very, very small pool of people who can do that work. It is a very difficult kind of work to put into a state procurement because you often don't know how the scope of work until a conservator receives a painting and then determines what the scope of work will be. So that has been is an exempted service when a work of art is either being handled or being treated for conservation. So we have an internal policy, of course, to ensure that we're getting the best value, but there are only certain qualified vendors who can do this kind of very specialized work.
Not that you can't hear me. Does that include storing these works of art?
No, we have our own storage facility now. For years we did not, but we do now, thankfully.
Awesome, awesome, wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much to you and your team. I do have one individual that signed up to testify on the State Archives budget, a Ms. Shauli Sarkar. Apologies if I mispronounce your name. Thank you again, Madam Archivist, and to your team. Ms. Sarkar, just as a reminder, non-agency representatives is 2 minutes, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon to the subcommittee. My name is Shauli Sarkar, and I'm here representing the Maryland State Bar Association, representing attorneys from all practice areas across the state. I'm here today to share the potential impact of the proposed budget for archives on our members and other industries. We became involved in this issue in February of 2025 when the archives proposed the 20-cent per page paywall. And the fee would significantly impact much of our work and would also likely pass on to clients and affect small businesses and low-income Marylanders. And I'll share that as soon as we learned about the fee, we became directly engaged with the archives and the governor's office to share feedback and find an equitable solution. And we continued those conversations last summer and provided feedback on updated subscription models. And we continue and look forward to further collaboration to resolve this issue. And I wanted to clarify, I know this is not a bill hearing, but the bill that was referenced, HB 576, Senate Bill 425, it does not restrict the archives from setting fees. It clarifies that it would be by regulation only to avoid any issues like last year's proposal from continuing again. I did want to note that in the key observations that there is a possibility about exploring another paywall by fiscal year 2028. And again, as this timeline is approaching, we've just asked to continue being a partner in that and to understand what that scale and what that fee structure looks like. We are a ready partner to fix this issue. We know that our attorneys are regular users of this record, and that we just ask that any solution also provides certainty to our industry. And I'm available for questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions of the subcommittee for this witness, Delegate Kaiser?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask to get some clarification. I said representing the Bar Association. Given that a lot of things are electronic, how much are people actually ordering on paper that you're worried about the 20-cent fee, which sounds like a lot. I don't disagree.
The 20-cent fee would be to access the digital record.
Access the digital. Okay,
so it
my error.
Yes.
I apologize. I don't need the question anymore. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you, Delegate Kaiser. Delegate Beecham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, at 20 cents per page, do you have any idea what it would cost for, say, a normal real estate transaction? Do you know how much it would add to that?
It certainly depends on the type of transaction. I know our real estate professionals have shared that it could be, adding thousands to some of these transactions simply to do your due diligence and making sure that you're doing those proper searches. It certainly adds up because it's a per page cost to view, not simply to print. And we estimate for attorneys it could be even much higher.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
That ends the hearing on the State Archives. We'll go next to Department of State Police. We'll begin with our budget analyst, Ms. Madeline Miller, followed by the agency representative, Mike Jackson, Acting Secretary/Superintendent of the State Police. Ms. Miller, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. I'll be presenting the Department of State Police's operating budget analysis. Between fiscal 26 and 27, the allowance grows by 21.7 million to 692.4 million. Most of the change is explained by growth in personnel costs and offsets from lower vehicle spending and one-time costs for the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center. Now turning to the MFR section in Exhibit 1 on page 5. The department is tasked with collecting crime data from local law enforcement agencies and sharing that data with the FBI. The overall Part 1 crime rate is shown here for calendar 2015 through 2024, the most recent year available. Between 2023 and 2024, Maryland's rate fell about 1.1% to a level 12.6% higher than the national level. Exhibit 2 on page 6 and Exhibit 3 on page 7 show how the rate per 100,000 changes for violent crimes as well, for one of the violent crimes under the Part 1 grouping and one of the property crimes under the Part 1 grouping. Violent crimes include murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. In 2024, there were 7.4 murders per 100,000 compared with 5 at the national level. Maryland's rate is 29.5% lower than it was in calendar 2021. Property crime rates include breaking or entering, larceny, and motor vehicle theft. Of those categories, the one with the most change in recent years was motor vehicle theft. There was an 18.9% decrease in thefts of this type between 2023 and 2024. Despite the decrease, Maryland's calendar 2024 rate is still 59.4% higher than the calendar 2022 level. In contrast, the national rate in calendar 2024 is 9.2% lower than it was in 2022. The second MFR topic begins on page 8. Exhibit 4 shows that the traffic fatality is estimated to decrease by 17.5% between 2024 and 2025 as vehicle miles traveled increases by an estimated 1.3% and as there were about 100 fewer fatalities. One reason for this reduction in fatalities could be the enforcement of driving under the influence laws. Between calendar 24 and estimated 25 data, the MFR submission suggests that DUI arrests rose approximately 1.2% after a few years of declining arrests, as shown in Exhibit 5 on page 9. The third MFR topic is illustrated with Exhibit 6 on page 10. One of the ways through which the department investigates crimes is through its Forensic Sciences Division. FSD provides analysis in biology, controlled dangerous substances, crime scene, firearm/tool marks, forensic document examination, latent prints, toxicology, and trace evidence. Exhibit 6, also on page 10, shows that CDS cases in calendar 2020 through estimated 2025 data. The completion rate of cases of this type analyzed changed from year to year. For example, 89.3% were completed within the calendar year in 2020 and 95% were completed in 2023. It's unlikely that it would ever be 100% as new cases can be submitted every day of the calendar year. And the average turnaround case time was about 55 days in calendar 2025. Case completion rates fell in 2024 and 2025 to 88.5% and 77.6% in estimated data, though this estimated figure is likely inaccurate. CDS analysis is performed at laboratories in Pikesville, Hagerstown, and Berlin. Construction of the Barrick v. Berlin capital project included the replacement of the forensic lab, and it's possible that disruptions caused by the construction and process for accrediting the new facility would have resulted in the percentage of CDS cases analyzed declining between calendar 24 and 25. In its testimony, DSP should provide the calendar 25 completion rate for CDS cases, describe FSD's goals for case turnaround time, and comment on how the new Berlin laboratory being in operation will impact its analysis of forensic evidence in calendar 26 and future years. For the final piece of MFR analysis, DSP reports inspections performed by the Office of the State Fire Marshal, as shown in Exhibit 7 on page 12. Estimated inspections in 2025 are approximately 33% higher than in 2019, the last year of pre-pandemic data. Fire-related deaths fell 14.2% from 2023 to 2024 and are estimated to fall further in 2025. An overview of fiscal 2027 spending is provided in the pie chart on page 13. Of the $692.4 million in the allowance, about 82.6% of spending supports personnel costs. The proposed budget change chart is on pages 15 and 16. As previously mentioned, the budget grows by $21.7 million, and that growth is fueled by regular personnel costs, which grow by $26.5 million. One provision in this year's BRFA, if adopted as introduced, would impact general and special fund spending for the Maryland State Police Aviation Command. This provision, which was also discussed in the Maryland Emergency Medical System Operations Fund forecast prepared by DLS, extends for 3 years a provision adopted in last year's BRFA. That provision expanded the allowable uses of the MEMSOF in fiscal 25 and 26 only so that Aviation Command could spend up to $5.5 million more from the special fund and $5.5 million fewer general funds. This year's BRFA extends the authorization until the end of fiscal 2029. Because the proposed budget change chart reflects contingent reductions, it's not obvious from looking at Exhibit 9 that this budget change is happening. Also related, Exhibit 10 on page 17 shows the planned Aviation Command spending and resulting general fund special fund split for the period of fiscal 23 through the allowance. Typically, the fund split is 80% special funds, 20% general funds, but actions taken to first promote the longevity of the special fund and then to support the health of the general fund have impacted that split as we go from year to year. The department's helicopters and fixed-wing plane get a little extra attention due to how they're supported with special funds. State Police's motor vehicle fleet is vital to its ability to fulfill its mission. Costs for vehicle purchases, maintenance, fuel, and insurance can fluctuate based on current fleet management needs. Exhibit 11 on page 18 shows that roughly $1.8 million less is provided in the allowance, in part due to fewer planned vehicle replacements. An area with little budget change is spending on the gun center database, which has been $1.3 million in fiscal 25 through the allowance. The department reports that the total cost is expected to be approximately $4.6 million, and for annual costs to be $1 million when the project is complete. Last year at this time, the department reported the development would be completed and deployed in December of 2025. In its testimony, DSP should provide a status update on the finalization of the database. Another area with no budget change is spending for the Maryland Sheriff's Association grant. Spending for this grant was initially planned to be $1 million total between fiscal 23 and 25. The spending is unmandated but was continued in the fiscal 26 budget and is included in the allowance. DLS recommends deleting the $333,000 provided in fiscal 27 in light of the state's fiscal condition and to be consistent with other recommendations related to public safety grants. Personnel data is shown on page 19. In fiscal 2026, the department has 3 positions that were abolished due to the voluntary separation program. Between fiscal 26 and the allowance, approximately 7 contractual positions are abolished with corresponding savings of about $258,000. There are 3 issues in the section that begins on page 21. The first is the agency's hiring and retention. As shown in Exhibit 12, between calendar 2016 and 2020, the department operated with an average of 10.1% of its sworn and civilian positions vacant. Since then, the 2 rates have fluctuated, but both were higher in 2024 actual data than in 2020. The department estimates that the overall vacancy rate was 11.8% in calendar 25, while budgeted turnover is set to 10.2% in fiscal 26, which includes part of 2025, and meaning that the budget would allow the department to fill additional vacancies. In the current allowance, turnover is set at 9.3%. Compared to other executive branch agencies, the department faces unique challenges for recruitment and for reducing vacancies. Sworn positions are most commonly hired after a training academy graduates. It's common for 1 to 2 training academies to be held each year. Exhibit 13 on page 22 shows that while the number of minimally qualified applicants has increased since calendar 2022, the estimated 2025 figure of approximately 1,500 remains well below the level a decade ago. Exhibit 14 on page 23 shows the number of candidates who graduated from the rigorous academy. Between 2016 and 2025, academy classes each started with an average of 42 candidates and 37 graduated. Another aspect of this vacancy issue is that sworn positions have different retirement rules than other employees, though within the department's workforce, the share of sworn and civilian employees eligible to retire is roughly equivalent. In response to concerns about the department's vacancy rate during the 2025 session, committee narrative was added to the 2025 Joint Chairman's Report requesting quarterly reports on personnel measures. Information in these reports suggests that of all Maryland State Police employees, just under 1 in 5 is currently eligible to retire. The share of sworn positions that are retirement eligible rose from 20% in July of 2025 to 20.6% as of December. Data from July and December is compared in Exhibit 15 on page 24. One of the ways through which the department plans to improve its hiring processes for sworn employees is to comply with the requirements of a proposed consent decree that was provisionally approved in November 2024. The Department of Justice dismissed the case in February of 2025. DSP remains voluntarily committed to the reform and requirements outlined in the consent decree and reports that the entry-level selection assessments required under the decree will likely be available for use in spring of 2026. The department has not yet been able to distribute the $2.75 million in monetary awards, however. The Department of State Legislative Services recommends that committee narrative be added for DSP to continue reporting quarterly personnel data in fiscal 27. Through these reports, the department should also update the legislature on its progress in meeting the consent decree's requirements. The second issue is on pages 25 and 26. As illustrated in Exhibit 16, state police personnel were deployed beginning in September 2025 to assist with crime suppression efforts in Baltimore City. Largely, this had to do with DUI enforcement and criminal enforcement activities, as well as serving outstanding arrest warrants. DSP reports that this resulted in about $310,000 of additional overtime spending, but fiscal impacts for the remainder of fiscal 26 and 27 are expected to be minimal. Finally, with the third issue, DLS recommends adding language to restrict $100,000 pending the submission of the 2025 Uniform Crime Report. The state police published the 2024 version over a month earlier than the 2023 report. The language will allow state police, as well as the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, to withhold a portion of 1/4 of state aid for police protection funding from any non-compliant local law enforcement agency. Hopefully there will be no issues, though, as state police reports that all local law enforcement agencies are using the new methodology that the FBI requires as of January 2025. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee at this time.
All right, thank you very much for a very thorough analysis. Any questions of the subcommittee for our budget analysts? All right. Seeing none at this time, I'd like to welcome Superintendent Michael Jackson and his team. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Osvero, Vice Chair Ivy, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Colonel Michael A. Jackson. Got confirmed on the 17th, so I'm pretty happy about that. Secretary of the Maryland Department of State Police, it's my pleasure to appear before you today. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Good to see you again. Although I'm on this side of the table. For your thorough and professional analysis. First, before I get started, it's an honor to sit before this committee. I've had the honor of being on this committee in my first 6 years here in the House of Delegates. So I don't take that lightly, and I don't take the work lightly. So I wanted to make sure I said that. And this is also Prince George's County's delegation room. Just another caveat. I want to take this opportunity to assure you that I approach this position with great pride and dedication. My priorities include reinforcing our rigorous training and standards, expanding recruitment efforts to reflect the diversity of our great state, investing in the wellness of our troopers and our professional staff, and strengthening partnerships with local, federal, and state partners, which includes each and every one of the 188 members of our General Assembly. I look forward to very robust constituent services and community engagements with each of you and all the members of the General Assembly. I have a few members of our team that are assembled here with me. Mr. John Wilhelm, our Chief Financial Officer, Lieutenant Colonel Chappell, who oversees our Sports Services Bureau, and our General Government Affairs Unit Director, Ms. Catherine Kelly. As you know, the Maryland Department of State Police has a rich and long history of tradition. It evolves and grows deeper in the roots of communities. With each passing day, we do more than enforce the law. We work to strengthen our relationship in the communities we serve. We work to strengthen our relationships by doing a number of things that touch families, by participating with Special Olympics and Boys and Girls Clubs across the state. Our barracks are involved across the state in supporting food drives, toy drives, and hosting annual events like the Halloween Trunk or Treat. We also take our charge to serve and protect those who live, work, and visit our great state very seriously. Over the last year, the Maryland State Police has responded to over 470,000 calls for service and conducted more than 18,000 investigations. Troopers conducted nearly 380,000 traffic stops, removed more than 5,500 drunk drivers from our highways, and investigated nearly 24,000 reportable crashes. We are committed to public safety, Mr. Chairman and members, and have had successes such as the Maryland Car Rally Task Force, which focuses to dismantle illicit and illegal car rallies while working to prevent them around the state. Members of that Car Rally Task Force includes members of this body's jurisdictions: Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore City and County, Anne Arundel County, and others. The Maryland Department of Transportation Authority as well. Since its inception, members of the task force have disrupted 180 car rally events in our state. Countless planned exhibitions continue to be prevented through high visibility patrols and enforcement efforts in areas we know these events are being held. Just this past weekend, the task force used high visibility patrols and enforcement to disrupt 8 coordinated rallies throughout the national capital region. That was just in one weekend. Maryland State Police is making strides to curb handgun violence as well in addressing road rage incidents involving firearms. Last year, the Highway Gun Crimes Initiative investigated 184 incidents involving the use of firearms. They made a total of 53 arrests during those investigations, and many of these cases are still under investigation. We have an academy class, which you will all receive an invitation to. Its graduation on May 8th, 2026. All members, we hope that you can make that. I know the session will be ended by that time. It will be great to see you there. I want to take a moment to share some of our successes in the Office of State Marshal. Ms. Miller mentioned some of them. In 2025, the Office of our Fire Marshal successfully conducted its annual Fall Community Risk Reduction Weekend, installing over 300 smoke alarms and 60 carbon monoxide detectors in homes across the state to enhance life safety and fire prevention. The Office of Fire Marshal has recorded a decrease in fire-related activities compared to 2024, reflecting the continued progress in prevention, education, and enforcement efforts. The Maryland State Police continues to serve by providing the highest quality of services available to Marylanders, to include recent life-saving efforts of one of our troopers assigned to the Northeast Barrack. On the morning of February 14th, Trooper First Class Warren was approached by a parent regarding the choking of their baby. Trooper Warren, without hesitation, performed first aid to remove the blockage. Moments later, you could hear the baby regain her breath as she begins crying. All caught on a body-worn camera, no less. I could recount other examples, but we'll leave it there for brevity of the time. As I mentioned, one of my priorities is the wellness of our employees. One of my top priorities, even as a legislator, I believe in that, has always been the health and wellness of those who provide public safety. We know this profession comes with a lot of risk, and that incidents include mental and physical health of our personnel challenges. We're working to expand the resources for our troopers, crime scene technicians, and other members of our professional staff. Our medical director and mental health advisor work around the clock to ensure resources are accessible and available. While our work is far from over, the Maryland State Police has made significant efforts to better our capabilities to serve, partner, and engage with the community. While our written testimony provides detailed specifics regarding our responses to DLS's recommended actions, below are some highlights. First, with respect, I'd like to share that the investment of the $33,000 in general funds to the Maryland Sheriff's Association benefits continuing education for law enforcement professionals across our state, and we respectfully request to keep those funds. Second, we concur with DLS's recommendation to release withheld funds associated with the UCR reports, Uniform Crime Reports. And we are hopeful, Ms. Miller and Mr. Chairman, and the members, that we won't have any more hiccups in getting those reports due to the upgrade of the system. Lastly, we concur with the DLS's recommendation to continue to require the quarterly reports for the Maryland State Police personnel measures. I want to thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to working with you. Some of you have worked with me in the past, not only in these chambers, but also in the community back in Prince George's County and across the state. You will see a very robust commitment to community engagement, which is the beginning, the middle, and the end to law enforcement and public safety and the public's engagement. So I look forward to that. I'll stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you very much, Superintendent, and congratulations on.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, very definitely looking forward to working with you. You'll certainly be missed in this subcommittee and this committee, but we know that we have someone to work with on the agency side on some of the concerns, but congratulations. So with that, any questions of the subcommittee? Vice Chair Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations, sir, on all the hard work and your recent appointment. You put me at ease because I know who you are, know where you come from, both Prince Georgians.
Yes, sir.
And I'm glad to have you there. One thing I'm most excited about, you're the former sheriff from Prince George's County. So when we talk about policing in the county, I mean, who knows better than you, quite frankly. So when I was reading through the briefing, of course, I had to highlight troopers being deployed in Baltimore City as of September 2025, and excited to see that. I wanted to hear from you about how that's going, and then very selfishly, wanted to see how we could bring those practices down to gorgeous Prince George's.
I appreciate your question, and I appreciate your delivery as well. So, and I get it. So, the efforts in Baltimore City, as we all recall, the ramp up of efforts in the city of Baltimore, where I believe the Maryland State Police had deployed roughly 46 members of the agency for a period of time. That has decreased to an ongoing presence in the city of roughly a nice team of members who are highly motivated and dedicated in the city that move about the city according to intel information. We work very closely with the Coordination and Analysis Center, and they're doing terrific work there in the city. Let me say this, the Maryland State Police is your police agency. We are Maryland's finest, but we are the resource law enforcement agency for the state, meaning we are there to help any and every jurisdiction with any particular matter and all matters. The question that you posed regarding Prince George's County, I'll tell you, just before the snowstorm, or the first large snowstorm, I received a call from Chief Nader from Prince George's County to ask for some help from the Maryland State Police to put forth some high visibility, I think it was a couple of weeks maybe that we worked with, and we'll have a report out on the success of that because it was successful. But to put forth, work with the Maryland, with the Prince George's County Police in Prince George's County and some areas that the chief deemed needed some high visibility of law enforcement. And so that was a very welcoming phone call for me, having served as the sheriff of Prince George's County and spent a career there. You know, that wasn't always the usual go-to agency. The Maryland State Police was not when the county needed that. We are working hard in every county and the city to enhance our accessibility and you know, to be that resource for those agencies. So we were very happy. We look forward to working with them more, and you will see us. And Mr. Vice Chair, if there's any particular place in the county that you think you need to have some visibility of the Maryland State Police, just let us know. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, any other questions of the subcommittee? All right, Superintendent, just a few questions for you. Appreciate the response. My understanding is you all will continue to provide the data around the DOJ consent decree.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate that update. Notice, coming back to the DLS analysis, I noticed that vacancies were higher than budgeted turnover. I think it mentioned that 1 in 5 employees eligible to retire. What is your agency's plan around recruitment and retention, right? You know, a lot of law enforcement officers may have, you know, extensive experience that may still be valuable to the agency. Any thoughts on that? Can you provide an update?
Yes, I can give you a brief update now, and we will have documentation to you soon. We are in the midst of, just for the record, today is day 105. That's on the good side. That's, I'm counting the days on the good side. But we're embarking upon a robust recruiting retention program within the agency. We have a July class scheduled. We will be getting back to a CHU Academy schedule. So the agency has fallen off on that. So we're going to be getting back to a January, July recruiting class academies, which we're so looking forward to. We also have, there's a piece of legislation that's running through both chambers that deals with the age. The Maryland State Police is the only agency in the state that has a maximum age where at age 60 you have to leave. And we're seeing men and women in other uniforms across the state, so they still have some value. So we have asked, in this capacity, I've asked the governor to grant me the opportunity to, like last year I had a bill in that just lifted the cap. It did not go through, but the governor has granted me the opportunity to submit up to age 62, which is sort of in line with the Social Security age. That's one. We have revamped, Mr. Chair, our at one point, as we were assessing every unit and division within the agency and bureau, we had a standalone recruitment unit, which was, quite frankly, a very diverse unit, that standalone unit. However, from that standalone unit, we had over 100 recruiters who were not full-time. They were part-time folks, and whenever the barracks could spare them across the 23 barracks across the state. So that was a nice number of folks. Also, when you're dealing with onboarding folks, you have an investigative group of folks that do the background investigations to ensure that we are hiring the proper individuals. Well, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, that group has zero diversity. There was no diversity within that group. And so what we did was immediately looked at coupling the recruiting, the standalone recruiting unit with the investigators to get some diversity there. And we have a more robust plan coming. And then lastly, regarding that matter, our polygraphers, the polygraph operators for the agency, we took a look at them. Again, one Hispanic male that was amongst that group. So we are addressing those. We have sent out job announcements or open up the application process for investigators, which are internal, and polygraph operators, which some are internal and some are external. So we are working in that regard. But again, we have a very robust program that we're putting together, and we will be sharing that with this committee. We want you all to walk along with us as we move the agency to not only what I believe the agency should look like going forward, but every member of that agency who do the work. sworn and professional staff, as well as those we're responsible to. That means the General Assembly and others, so.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Wanted to come to promotional practices.
sir.
During my time here in PSA, I've heard from the Black and Hispanic Law Enforcement Association in Maryland around the promotion practices of the Department of State Police. I know we heard a bill yesterday, the full committee around, it was a department bill around promotions and so on. And I am concerned that, you have individuals with the experience who are being overlooked, not just for promotions, but the department's promotion practices. Can you provide an update on what it is that you will be doing, you and your team, to ensure that some of the concerns, and I believe it was the subject of a suit.
Yes, sir.
Can you all provide an update on what it is your agency is doing? And also if you all can furnish this subcommittee with like a demographic breakdown, like how many folks do you all have in leadership right now that have been recently promoted? I'd appreciate that.
We can certainly provide you with all that information. I will tell you this. We just recently had promotional process concluded on January 21st, I believe. We had a number of promotions. Quite frankly, I don't sit on lists. I've never sat on lists. I think it's the worst thing that an agency can do. And I don't care what the excuse is. If the employees have made the grade, if they're the promotional process, then they get promoted. So we are working diligently to exhaust the list in the proper manner, which means promoting people. So we have another round that's going to be coming up. We have just generally, and we'll get you a more in-depth report out of the promotions of the agency through, and I'll go back, this is what I have before me, is through so we've had since December 24th through January 21st, we've had 137 promotions. Minority promotions were roughly 26%, females 11%. And Mr. Chairman, you will see this report goes all the way back to August of 23, so you will have a copy of this going forward. I will also tell you that something I recognize, and having served in the General Assembly and having heard some of the complaints about opportunities, I came in the agency honored to have been selected, came into the agency with my eyes wide open on the challenges that are before us, including the lawsuits, and we have a follow-up meeting scheduled with our AG regarding some of those matters. But we are assessing everything within the agency. I will tell you that while the numbers are grossly low for Black and Hispanics and other minorities, we are not reflective of the state. In my statement, I read about my commitment. I understand how that works. I've done that before in my other life, and we will stay steadfast on that. But I also realize that there are some folks who have experience in this agency that, sometimes there's some not only diamonds in the rough, but there are also the placement of employees. So your front-serving force within the Maryland State Police is the largest component, that's field operations, which are the 23 barracks. And so those are the folks that you see out in your communities where you work. What we don't have, and what I found out, is that we did not have some of those who had some experience and expertise within the agency who were in pretty good positions, positions that if I, as a trooper, saw that individual, I could probably aspire to be, to rise to that rank or try to become that rank or go to that unit. But if you don't see it, it's kind of, exposure is a primary inhibitor for success for folks. So we're making some adjustments, not only with promotions, but with transfers and other things. So we'll keep you informed, sir. We believe we've been making great strides over the last 105 days. We'll continue.
Thank you for that. I know you have a good bit of experience in law enforcement, very extensive experience in law enforcement, and so I'm just curious, are you familiar with the FBI assessment titled White Supremacist Infiltration of Law Enforcement?
I am familiar with that, yes.
Okay. So the report was published 2 decades ago, 20 years ago. It was released by Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin, the unredacted version, and it's deeply concerning, not just the fact that the report acknowledges that white supremacist groups have infiltrated law enforcement in the United States. Maryland is not immune, but that if not addressed, there are a number of communities, not just African American, Latino, Asian American, Jewish, Muslim, immigrant, LGBTQIA+. Basically, Marylanders have every reason to be concerned about white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement. Can you or any member of your team who are present here speak to what it is your agency is doing to root out white supremacist infiltration within the Department of State Police?
Well, I'll answer that, and we'll continue to have conversations about that and other challenges that we have. You know, I mentioned a little while ago about ensuring that we have the proper folks who are screening folks coming into the agency. And that is where it starts pretty much and where it ends, to ensure if I don't have folks, and it doesn't matter what environment you're involved in, if I don't have folks with the proper background or an open concept of what you know, the agency should look like, then we run the risk of ensuring that that never happens. Well, I'm a little different. We're going to be focused on, you know, this agency. We're going to work our darndest to make sure that this agency is reflective of the community that we serve. It's the right thing to do. You know, while it wasn't yesterday, I walked around with a card in my pocket when I was sheriff of Prince George's County, and that card was updated at least twice a year, and it showed the demographics of my agency. That included sworn and professional staff, because we wanted to make sure that we were reflective. If we don't bring the right background to the agency, then the right background would never be, or the communities that we serve will never get the proper service. So it's a constant work, but a worthwhile work and an honorable work. So we're committed, sir, and we're your partner, and I am always available, and so is my team. So.
Do you think, Mr. Superintendent, do you think there's any utility to having a question under the penalty of perjury, asking particularly, you know, like prospective law enforcement officers, whether they are a member of or affiliated with a white supremacist organization? Do you think there's any utility in having something like that as, you know, part of like screening? I know there are a few questions that that agencies sometimes have on applications under penalty of perjury. Is there any utility in having one of those?
I would, with respect, I would reserve that to the AG's office, you know, to maybe assess that may be, you know, there, but I would not feel comfortable to make that statement. But the AG's office or whomever you would seek as a chair of a committee, you know, that advice. So.
I'd certainly look forward to working with you and your team. This is a serious problem, and it's not going away.
Absolutely.
And it's a serious problem to public safety. Yep. If we are not addressing white supremacist infiltration, we're essentially allowing people to police our streets, having the protection of a badge, a gun, the law, and essentially, you know, doing what they want to with impunity. And so I am very concerned after reading this report. I raised this, and I will continue to raise it, and the expectation is that you all as agency heads, that we can work together to ensure that we're rooting out white supremacist infiltration of law enforcement. This is not the last time I'm going to bring this up, so just a full notice to your team, and I expect for us to follow up so that we can work on this together.
Absolutely. Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Any other questions for our superintendent? All right, and then real quickly before you leave, if your agency can provide any information on how many requests for no-knock warrants that I'm seeing a yes, I'm seeing a no, but if your agency can provide.
We will.
Yes, I'd love to know how many requests for no-knock warrants the Maryland Department of State Police applied for in, not this year, but certainly previous fiscal years. If you want to go back as far as like the past 4 fiscal years, I'd appreciate that information.
Got it. Yes, sir.
All right, congratulations again,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Superintendent.
Thank you all. Great to
Take
see
care.
you. Great to see you all again.
All right, and that ends the hearing on the Department of State Police. I see no witnesses for this agency, so we will move next to, is our Comptroller here? Okay. I know earlier, just coming back to an earlier agency, the Maryland Commission on History and Culture, I know there is a representative from the agency who is here and able to testify, I believe the CFO. Are they in the subcommittee room with us? Can you come forward, please? Please. And whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, greetings, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Perchio, and I am the Chief Financial Officer for the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. Our executive director had planned to testify today. However, due to an emergency, could not be here. So I will be testifying in her place. So as the CFO of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, I stand before you representing the only African American agency in the nation that operates both the State Museum and an African American Heritage Grant Program, which is a unique model that positions Maryland as the national leader in African American history preservation. Maryland, as a founding colony, has a profound history in the anti-slavery movement, arts and science innovation, and civil rights legacy. As an agency, we aim to build a stronger ecosystem for preserving Black history, educating and inspiring all people about this shared story of resistance and achievement. In partnership with the Maryland Historical Trust, in fiscal year 2025, we awarded $5 million to 31 projects spanning sacred burial grounds, freedom schools, and sites of resistance. Sites such as Quinn Chapel AME Church in Frederick, a safe house on the Underground Railroad that later became a Civil War hospital, and one of the first Black schools for Black children, and Catoctin Furnace African American Cemetery in Thurmont, where research has identified over 40,000 descendants of enslaved ironworkers. This year brought unprecedented demand, 78 applications requesting over $15 million demonstrated the urgent need for expanded preservation funding. Meanwhile, the Banneker Douglas Tubman Museum, as a product of our 5-year strategic plan, delivered transformative programming that engaged over 100,000 people. The Sacred Spaces exhibition garnered international attention with features in BBC, Ebony, and the New York Times. We published a scholarly catalog of essays for the exhibit and launched the Senator Verda Freedom Welcome archival project of her legislative office, honoring Maryland's first African-American woman senator. Our museum will be a flagship location to learn her story and profound civil rights legacy to our nation. Beginning in 2027, we are also launching pre-development to reimagine our permanent exhibition to capture the untold stories and more contemporary moments in Maryland Black history that will educate, inspire, and empower people to be positive agents of change in their communities. Our young programs cultivate the next generation of cultural stewards. Through our third year of partnership with the Housing Authority of Annapolis, last summer students did a cross-analysis of Annapolis history with the Gullah Geechee heritage in South Carolina, learning indigo dyeing, sweetgrass weaving, and oral traditions. We're excited this summer they will be traveling to Senegal, connecting Maryland's African-American legacy to the broader diaspora, a transformative educational model recognized nationally. Our commission and staff are also fulfilling state historical research. Through federal funding, we have hired 5 county historians who are researching the descendant communities of 13 individuals of African descent who lived during the 18th and 19th centuries, whose remains were displaced by land erosion and construction sites. This work represents healing, dignity, and our commitment to those who came before us. Your support of our fiscal year 2027 budget will ensure Maryland remains the national standard for state-level African-American history preservation. These investments will ensure the growth and impact of our preservation and educational work throughout our state. Thank you for your time and open to any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much. Any questions of the subcommittee for the CFO of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And that ends the budget hearing on the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. Next, we will have the Comptroller of Maryland. We'll begin first with our budget analyst, Ms. Yashodhara Rai, followed by our Comptroller, Ms. Brooke Learman, and her team. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Rai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. I am Yashodhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the fiscal 27 budget analysis for the Office of the Comptroller, who is the state's chief fiscal officer and responsible for collecting tax revenue and enforcing compliance with the state's tax laws. The cover chart shows that fiscal 27 budget for the Comptroller's office decreases by $61.1 million. This is after accounting for proposed deficiencies. The largest decrease occurs in the reimbursable funds, mainly related to the decrease in the agency's 3 major IT projects. This is due to the changes in their project estimates. Moving on to performance measures, Exhibit 1 on page 5 shows that taxpayers filing their personal tax returns electronically has increased by 1.8% in fiscal 25 as compared to fiscal 24. Similarly, the percentage of electronic returns processed within 4 days during the tax season has increased to 92% in fiscal 25 from 87% in fiscal 24. This is the highest reported during the reporting period. Previously, the Comptroller notified that reporting tax returns indicators on fiscal year basis may alter the trends as a tax year spans between 2 fiscal years. As a result, 2 indicators that measure the percentage of tax returns filed during a tax season was included in the MFR submission. However, no data is reported for tax year 24. The Comptroller should comment on the unavailability of tax year data and provide a timeline for when this data will be reported in the MFR submission. Exhibit 2 on page 7 shows that telephone calls remain the most common method to communicate with the Comptroller's Taxpayer Services Division. This indicator reached its highest number at about 803,000 telephone calls in fiscal 25. These communications are mostly related to refund status, how to claim tax credit, notices received, or how to remedy license suspensions. The average number of minutes a call is on hold also reached its highest to 7 minutes. The fiscal 26 working appropriation includes $2.9 million in one-time funding for a third-party call center, which is not included in the fiscal 27 budget. The Comptroller should provide an update on how the call center contract supports outreach along with the year-to-date trends. The Comptroller should also comment on how it plans to manage telephone calls in fiscal 27 since additional funding for the contract is not included in the budget. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows that customer satisfaction with web-based services at the Comptroller's office dropped to 65.4% in fiscal '25. This is the lowest between fiscal 2020 and '25, and the Comptroller should comment on the reason for the decrease in customer satisfaction. Exhibit 4 on page 9 shows that the number of active delinquent individual income tax accounts increased by 1.4% in fiscal '25, and the number of active delinquent business tax accounts decreased by 0.8% in fiscal '25. The Comptroller should comment on the efforts to enforce tax laws and fees to reduce the number of active delinquent cases. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows how the Comptroller uses various methods to pursue recovery of unpaid taxes. The Comptroller should comment on the low rate of recovery of unpaid taxes except for offsets by the Internal Revenue Services. Exhibit 6 on page 11 shows the amount of unpaid taxes recovered from fiscal 2013 through fiscal '25. The collection of unpaid income taxes reached its highest in fiscal '25 at about $595 million, while the amount recovered from unpaid business taxes reduced significantly by 76.6% in fiscal '25. The Comptroller should comment on the significant reduction in the amount collected from unpaid business tax cases and how it plans to recover the pending amounts. Exhibit 7 on page 12 shows that while the number of estimated business tax accounts has increased in fiscal '25 by a total of 32.5% from fiscal '23, the rate at which the audits are conducted is lower in comparison to the growth rate of the tax accounts. Moving on to some updates in fiscal '26 on page 13, Section 21 of the fiscal '26 budget bill added a total of $1.3 million to add 11 regular positions across various divisions which are in various stages of recruitment. 2 proposed deficiency appropriations for fiscal '26 are included in the fiscal '27 budget for a total of $2.3 million. This includes $2 million in general fund for shortfalls related to lower than expected vacancy savings and $270,000 in special funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund to conduct a mandated study on the total assessed cost of greenhouse gas emissions, which is as required by chapters 2 and 12 of 2025 special session. Exhibit 8 on page 14 shows an overview of the agency's $285.2 million in fiscal '27 allowance. 59% of the budget is for personnel expenses. A total of 21% of the budget is allocated for various contracts, and the balance will fund major IT projects and other operational costs. Exhibit 9 on pages 15 and 16 shows that the fiscal '27 budget decreases by 17.7% as compared to fiscal '26. This is after accounting for the proposed deficiency appropriations and a contingent reduction. The largest decrease, as mentioned earlier, of about $73.9 million is due to the reduction in the estimated project costs for the 3 major IT projects. A provision in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2026 is discussed in page 17. This provision expands the allowable uses of SEEF and will swap about $125,000 in general funds with special funds from SEEF to support an existing climate resilience director position who will serve as the Comptroller's liaison in discussions and efforts related to climate change mitigation. DLS recommends modifying the contingent budget bill language to match it with the BRFA provision. Personnel information appears on pages 17 and 18. 10 positions in the Comptroller's office were abolished under the Voluntary Separation Program in fiscal '26. There is no change in the regular positions in the fiscal '27 budget. A net increase of 12.6 contractual full-time equivalent positions is included in the fiscal '27 budget. 10 of these positions were previously funded through contracts, while the other 2.6 positions are new. The first issue on page 19 discusses the Financial Management Information System Modernization IT project. Exhibit 10 on page 19 shows that the total estimated project cost for this project has increased from $60 million in the beginning of the 2023 session to up to $350 million in the beginning of 2026 session. This is mainly due to the scale and complexity of the project as it encompasses applications that are used statewide, like the financial accounting platform, which requires effective and efficient coordination. The project is currently in planning phase and has engaged with about 90 agencies to map business processes and analyze systems of each agency that has provided an insight into the deficiencies with the current financial management system. According to the agency, design for the new system is scheduled to begin by July of 2027. The biannual status report for this project, as required by chapters 22 and 23 of 2023, ends on January 1st, 2027. The Comptroller should provide the expected timeline for project completion. The second issue appears on pages 21 and 22 and highlights some of the revisions that were made to the Maryland Uniform Disposition of Abandoned Property Act by Chapters 635 and 636 of 2025. Some of these revisions included the expansion of property to include digital assets and simplifying the claims processes. The Comptroller's Office launched a new unclaimed property website in October of 2025, which also integrated the new provisions of Chapter 635 and 636. The Comptroller estimates requiring additional $4.1 million in fiscal 27 for the new system maintenance, services for the data analytics team, customer relations management platform, and other IT projects. The Comptroller should provide an update on the implementation of Chapter 635 and 636 and also on the planned fund source for the $4.1 million. Exhibit 11 on page 22 shows that the amount of unclaimed property reported was $351 million, and the amount of unclaimed property paid to its rightful owner was $121 million in fiscal 25. Both these measures are the highest reported between fiscal 2020 and fiscal 2025. DLS recommendations are on page 23. They both amend the budget bill language to align more closely with the BRFA provision. Page 24 provides a summary of the two reports that were submitted by the Comptroller's Office as required by the 2025 JCR. Pages 25 through 31 are appendices. This is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rye, as always, for your very thorough analysis. Any questions of our subcommittee for budget analysts? Seeing none, we will turn it over to our comptroller, and the reason why I am in a group text with family members about unclaimed property.
It's the best. Our news site is really fantastic, so let us know if you need any help.
Yeah, I will. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you. For the record, I'm Brooke Learman. I'm honored to serve as the 34th Comptroller of the state of Maryland and delighted to introduce you to some of our leadership. With me, I have Rihanna Matthews-Brown, our Chief of Staff, Andy Schoffel, our Chief Deputy Comptroller. Who else do we have here? Where'd they go? Steve Harrington, can you raise your hand? Our Government Affairs Director, Ben Siegel, our Deputy Comptroller for Policy, Public Works, and Investments. Zandra Young is our new Finance Director. Rob O'Connor, can you raise your hand so people know who you are? You're our CIO. Liz is our Government Affairs Associate. Adam Abadir is our Deputy Comptroller for Public Engagement and Communications. And Erica Roach is our Assistant Chief Deputy. So we brought them all out to see you guys. If you guys have any questions, want to have them here. So it's such a pleasure to be here. When I last appeared before this subcommittee, I discussed the significant investments that we'd made to modernize the Comptroller's Office, strengthen our customer service operations, and begin the transformation of the state's aging revenue and financial infrastructure. And I am so pleased that we are so far underway at this point. We had major progress last year that I'll talk to you all a little bit about, and we have more to do, big moves that are coming this year. But before I turn to our priorities and talking to you about the work we're doing, I just want to also briefly remind the subcommittee of the scope of our work. As Maryland's revenue administrator, the Comptroller's office, we serve over 3.2 million individual taxpayers each year. We issue more than 2.6 million refunds. Last year, 477,000 households earned income tax credits, totaling $550 million. We also serve 500,000 businesses. So our agency touches more individuals, families, and businesses than any other agency in the state of Maryland. We also distribute large dollars across many funds and entities. Every special fund that's created, we account for and distribute. All the counties and the cities that you all represent, we send them their money after collecting it, and we work hand in glove with them. Our 3 priorities that we adopted at the start of my administration continue to guide our work. Our first priority is to make government work better. And in many ways, I think the Comptroller's office really functions as the backbone of our state government. You might not even realize we're there. You certainly can't see us sometimes, but we are holding it all together. And our duties are extensive. One of our key goals, though, is truly to bring this agency into the 21st century and to make sure that we are well positioned for future years. So to do that, we have launched a new website. We launched it last March, marylandcomptroller.gov. It's 508 compliant. It's mobile responsive. Its mobile responsive sites are available in English, Spanish, Chinese, with Korean planned for future releases. During the redesign, we removed 9,000 outdated and duplicative pages. And so it's just easier for people to access it now. Maryland Tax Connect is our new tax platform for the state of Maryland. We moved all of our businesses to it 2 years ago. This year, we are planning to move all individual taxes to Maryland Tax Connect. This is the biggest transformation in IT in a state agency in many years. We will be moving, again, all of your constituents to a new tax platform on the back end, and if they interact with us, they'll be using Maryland Tax Connect, and that transition will occur in August. Last year, understanding that there have been many challenges with customer service, we launched the agency's first CRM, Customer Relation Management System. It's called MyCom Connect. Since the launch, we've processed more than 800,000 taxpayer intakes. Unclaimed property, we launched a brand new system in unclaimed property last year as well, and we've implemented improved cybersecurity and fraud detection services, including upgraded infrastructure within our hearings and appeals division. So we are constantly now moving towards new modern systems that work better for the people in our agency and serve the people of Maryland better as well. Our second core priority is to make sure that we are engaging with the residents of the state. It's not my agency, it's not even your agency, right? This is the agency for the people of Maryland, and we want to make sure that the resources that we have, whether it's the research reports that we are producing or the materials we have on the earned income tax credit or child tax credit, that those resources, or it's telling people about their unclaimed property, we want to make sure that those resources are getting out to reach people. I do have information in here about the extensive work that we've done on the earned income tax credit. You all know that this is one of Maryland's most effective anti-poverty programs and certainly one of its largest. We have, last year, our agency issued 477,000 earned income tax credits worth more than $500 million. And we have launched, again, our Earned It campaign, and we hope that all of you delegates will participate with us in it. We have social media toolkits on our website, so you can share information about the EITC on your social media and in your communities. We have flyers and more. And again, these are for working Marylanders, folks who are low income, often working parents, and the EITC is there's a federal one, but our state one is just as important. And we know that many of your constituents and our constituents aren't claiming it, even though they qualify. So this is a way to get money back into their pockets to help make sure that they can make ends meet during challenging times. We also created the Office of Taxpayer Advocate, and I believe you should have with you their first report that we published just last month. Finally, our third core priority is supporting Maryland's long-term economic, fiscal growth, and success. Over the last year, we've worked to leverage two of our greatest assets, our data and our internal expertise within the Office of the Comptroller, to assist policymakers and business leaders and everyday residents, in making data-driven decisions. Early in my tenure, we released the agency's first ever research report on the state of Maryland's economy. And since then, last year, we released 3 reports on costs, one on transit, one on climate change, and one on school construction costs. We also released the report on housing and migration and the economy. And responding to the JCR, we released a full report on baby bonds and what a Maryland baby bonds program could look like. I am in now a national cohort with my fellow state financial officers, many of them, and we work to promote the idea of baby bonds, which we all believe is an important future goal. This is the work that we love doing, and there is so much more to go into, but I know there's a lot going on, so I'll leave it at that and just respond to the DLS comments. Thank you so much, Ms. Ray, for your back and forth with us and your hard work on this. I think this is the first time you've ever done the Office of the Comptroller, so thank you very much. So the first comment is on the reason for the unavailability of tax year data for the 2 performance measures. It's simple that the data for tax year 2025 wasn't available due to the very small window between the end of the calendar year and the final due date for due BEM. So they now have that data. The second comment that you requested was that we should provide an update on how the call center contract is supporting outreach and customer service activities. So this call center contract that you all included in our budget and that the governor included in our budget last year is not for this year. It's for when we launch our Maryland Tax Connect for individuals in August. So that call center will not go live until May or June, and it will then be there to support individuals and us in providing that extra service, because we know there will be more calls that come in, and we just aren't going to be, we can already not handle the call volume that we have, let alone increased call volume when we migrate systems. And so that call center will be simply for 1 year for the bump up that we know is going to happen in individuals reaching out to us because of our new Maryland Tax Connect system. The Comptroller DLS also requested that we comment on the decreased customer satisfaction in FY24 and 25. We think that this is largely attributable to the transition from our legacy system to our new cloud-based systems. It's sort of, we're at a pretty challenging point in our agency's history right now, in that we have a system that is completely outdated that some people are using, and we're also migrating folks to a new system. So when people are using a very outdated system, they get frustrated because it is not a good, and it's not a good system, but then they also get frustrated when you move people to a new system, because then you have to learn a new system. The goal is, right, to get past both of those hurdles. When you're in the new system and people have been in it for a while, we expect that people will be used to it and things will improve. DLS also asked us to comment on our efforts to strictly enforce tax laws and fees to reduce the number of active delinquent cases. So this is, I think, an important, the next couple cases are really important to talk about the difference between compliance and enforcement. The goal for our agency is that people pay what they owe. we want them to pay what they owe without us having to put a lien on their license, or without us having to send them collection letters, right? Or without us having to garnish wages. We want them, and so we are trying to encourage through many different avenues voluntary compliance before we have to take more drastic steps. But the Compliance Division, which does our audits and our compliance work, has launched several new efforts to enforce compliance. We have a program called the Remote Seller Program, which finds businesses that are out-of-state businesses that are selling in Maryland to make sure that we are enforcing our tax laws if they have not paid, to go make sure that they are. We've also launched a managed audit program. We've developed a new audit team in our individual income tax unit and are engaged with a vendor to look at unreported income in the digital economy, including folks who are making capital gains in crypto, are making money on their many Airbnbs and not reporting it, and other areas like that. These efforts were buoyed by a $1.7 million investment in staffing and a $3.9 million investment in technology for FY25. Thanks to these investments, we were able to support these new efforts and bring on 8 new auditor trainees to our individual tax auditing unit and 14 new auditor trainees to our business tax auditing unit. While training is still underway for many of these new staff, these new investments alone just last year generated over $5 million. So they have already more than paid for themselves. And we expect that to triple next year. Also asked us to comment on why the recoveries of unpaid taxes through payment agreements, tax liens, bank attachments, and salary garnishments remain below pre-pandemic levels. So again here, I think a couple things. It's worth reminding that these enforcement methods are last resorts, and they only need to occur when individuals who have funds refuse to pay. The end goal is compliance, not onerous enforcement. The Compliance Division's approach has been to communicate. I know it's shocking, but we're trying to communicate with people and work with our taxpayers in order to drive payments rather than creating undesirable interactions and challenges in collections. Our liens often exceeded our payment plans pre-pandemic, and now we're generating more payment plans than liens and working successfully with our taxpayers to reduce their debts and generate revenue. I think this is an incredibly positive trend. Payment plans are when people say, oh, I know I owe money, I can't afford to pay it all at once. And so we work with them and we say, that's fine. Our goal is not to bankrupt you, but we need you to start paying what you can on a monthly basis. And so they enter into a payment plan for us. That means that we're bringing money into the state, whereas before we were simply sending out lien notices and we weren't collecting that money. I think it's also worth reminding the committee that during the pandemic, there was no compliance activity at all. We were the only state in the nation where all auditing ceased during the state of emergency during the pandemic. And so we have had to completely rebuild our entire compliance division. It basically didn't exist, until I got there or a couple months before. So we are working to build it in the right way, to do the right work, to bring in money for the people of Maryland and for the state. Next, the DLS asked us to comment on the reason for the drop in the amount collected from delinquent business tax cases and how we plan to recover the pending amounts. So one note is that the period under review coincides with when we transitioned to our new system, Maryland Tax Connect, which was a modernization effort that totally shifted how we identify, bill, and collect on delinquent accounts for businesses. While the data suggests a decline in collections, we want to be clear, we do not believe less revenue is being collected. In fact, we believe the opposite is true. Just as noted above, the goal is compliance and payments, not paper pushing. Under the legacy, the old system that we had, auto billing for delinquencies would often trigger within 2 days of a return being posted. So say a business posts a return, and the system says, oh, like you didn't pay everything you owe, and it just sends out a letter immediately to that business. Well, now what happens, well, that led to frequent inaccuracies. So payments applied to wrong periods, funds held in suspense, bills were generated for accounts that had in fact already been paid. So that really inflated our delinquency figures and compromised the reliability of the data. Now what we do under the new tax system, we don't send those letters out immediately because people in this new system can go in and look at their accounts and see, oh, I owe money, I didn't pay everything, and then just pay it so that we don't have to send them a letter and don't have to waste resources going after them. As a result, significantly fewer delinquencies are reaching the billing stage, and our annual accounts receivable reflects this improvement, declining from $826 million in FY24 to $731 million in FY25. So we are taking a much more deliberate, targeted approach to collections, and we think that we are still bringing in the money. So the two issue areas were on FEMAS and on unclaimed property. Our FEMAS modernization, this is a gargantuan, that's a technical term, project. The biggest IT modernization probably in state history. It is every single agency now, they balance their budgets and their accounts, and then they send it to us, and we are the general accountant for all the agencies. And we push out payments to everybody. So if a contract goes through the Board of Public Works, we generate that payment, and we work with the Treasurer's Office, and we push it out. So FEMAS acts like the ledger for the state of Maryland, and every agency uses it. It is past its end of life. It cannot do many of the things that we need it to do. And we talk with OLA about this too, the things that we can't see and can't do. So this modernization project that we are now leading is essential and huge. We are also, one of the few, I think, remaining states to have not done this. Like most states have already moved into a new ERP, a new accounting system. So phase one of this new system will deliver our new general ledger, a new budget ledger, new cost allocations, new financial reporting, allowing us to totally decommission FEMAS. And FMIS stands for Financial Management Information System, FEMAS. So subsequent phases, so after that, we'll also expand capability to grants management. So think of all the capital grants that you guys send out, making sure that if you send out a grant to ABC nonprofit, that they can then have an account, see where the money is, understand when it's coming, and work with the agency more clearly. So key milestones include that we are going to select our ERP vendor in Q4 of this fiscal year, so this summer. We are doing demos in March through April, and then we will select a system integrator, which is the entity that helps us, work it into our government in Q2 of FY27, so still before the end of this calendar year. And phase one implementation will start in Q3 of FY27. The timeline developed has to continue to align, of course, with the availability of funding. So we have to make sure that this remains in the budget and that it's budgeted appropriately so that we can do this. Happy to take questions, and Rob O'Connor and Erica, who are here, are also working very closely on this project. And then finally, unclaimed property. The Unclaimed Property Modernization Act that we passed last year is now fully in force. The bill updated and streamlined many procedures to align the state with national best practices. The legislation also expedited the process of reuniting Marylanders with their unclaimed property. And we have now funds to support the maintenance of critical IT systems that benefit the state. So we've already fully implemented the changes. We have our new system in place as well. It launched in October. The division is already exercising its new authority to reunite properties with rightful owners without the owner even having to initiate a claim. So we go through and scrub, claims and see, sort of make sure that we have all the data we need for folks, and then we can send out quick pay checks to folks valued No, so these are the smaller amounts that we send. We sent 1,000 of them in December. It was our first batch. Sent 1,000 checks for a total of $412,000 out to people. We're happy to work with you all as well to promote this through your social media, at community meetings. Like, let people know that there may be money for them. Like, become your constituents' best friends,
Yeah.
it exists and we want them to claim it. I will leave it at that, and you have all of our written responses as well. Happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Madam Comptroller. And the work that you all are doing on unclaimed property is definitely being noticed by my in-laws, nothing
People
to do
who
with me.
matter most, yeah.
Right. Put me in touch with the Comptroller.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you very much to you and your team and just all the work that you all are doing. Questions of the subcommittee, Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Comptroller, so good to see you.
So good to see you. Welcome to Appropriations.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question for you. Something that you said about FEMAS, maybe not the question you might be expecting, but I want to make sure I heard what you said, that all the payments from all the state agencies go through FEMAS now. And so my question is, we have a challenge, as I've learned on the Appropriations Committee, with a lot of deficiency spending, maybe at least 20 pages of it in the budget book. Is that something that can be highlighted, tagged, noted in your system when agencies are going beyond the budget? And is there a way to add to our transparency of when that's happening?
That's a good question. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
You both work in that.
You have to be
space.
on the mic.
I don't think I can press. It says don't press. Okay, press button. There we go. Sure. Yep. For the record, Andy Schaffel, Chief Deputy Comptroller. Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. That is one of the many controls we plan to put in place with the new system. Like, there might be times where you want to run a deficiency and there might be some knowledge of that, but absolutely we will be able to put warning signs in place and do some reporting around that so DPM can become aware sooner, the agencies can become aware sooner. But that's absolutely one of the many improvements we expect out of FEMAS, the FEMAS replacement.
If I could, Mr. Chair. And so, just to be clear, so that capacity doesn't exist now, but that's something you're already planning to do?
Yes, an agency could go in and track that themselves. It's very challenging right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Right. Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. Any questions of the subcommittee?
Can I make one final comment?
Yep.
Sorry, I forgot.
If you could, because I do have a question,
Sure.
if you could just incorporate it in your response. But I was just curious because we've been getting briefings from state agencies about the impact of HR 1 or the big BS bill on our, state, the impact on services, et cetera. Can you speak to the revenue side of that? Like, what's the impact of HR 1 on our revenue for our state?
Sure, absolutely. So we are the agency tasked, obviously, with revenue estimates for the state of Maryland. And one of our responsibilities is to produce a report after any federal bill goes into effect that has revenue changes, that changes to the Internal Revenue Code, to produce a report to explain how those changes impact the state and our revenue code. So we produced and shared that report in September. It's called the 60-day report because it has to be out 60 days after the federal government. And it also is used by our agency to determine whether and in what places we need to automatically decouple from federal changes that were passed. So maybe I'll turn it over to Andy to talk a little bit more about the changes, what we expected to come and what did come. One thing I'll note is that for the, we score everything, or maybe score is the wrong word, but when we are doing our revenue estimates, we take all bills literally. So if they have a sunset date, like the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act did at the federal level, we assumed it would sunset in our revenue projections. And that is different than some other entities in the state, how they do it, but that is that impacted some of our estimates.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sorry, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head for the various provisions, but there are puts and takes within it. Certain provisions would lead to increased revenue in the state of Maryland. Certain provisions would lead to decreased revenue in the state of Maryland. Part of the language that creates that 60-day report asks us to identify the provisions that will have more than a $5 million impact in the tax year, in the fiscal year. The language gets very complicated, but the idea is that we wouldn't allow those provisions to go into effect in the state of Maryland until this legislative body has had a chance to assess those provisions. So what that leads to is what we call auto-decoupling. So there are 3 provisions that we auto-decoupled for tax year 25. In other words, they are not affecting the state's bottom line, but you all would want to consider those as you look forward to tax year 26 and beyond. I think we can share the report. I don't want to certainly give you any bad numbers. I just don't recall them off the top of my head.
We'll follow up and email you the report, and it's also available on our website and under the reports tab, and we'll send it to you too, so you have it. And we did brief the Ways and Means Committee early on in session to go over the numbers with our BRE director as well. And I think, final comment, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, is we do have a budget request. So we submitted our budget request to the governor, the Speaker and Senate President, of course, in August 2025. The governor and the Secretary of DBM provided some additional funding to us, but we have 3 additional areas where we do need your help and are asking for additional funding. So the first is in information technology and systems. We are migrating, our new tax system in August, but to build new tax types that have been passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor, we need to pay to build those tax types. So we are requesting $2 million in FY27 so that we can build out the tax law changes that have been passed. That includes the short-term rental tax and an update to our pass-through entity tax collection. We'll also be working to ensure that the single sign-on effort led by the Department of Commerce can become a reality so that businesses don't need multiple usernames and passwords for every agency. So that funding, we don't have it right now. And so I'm not sure how we would build these tax types without it. The second issue is your constituents have felt it. You've probably felt it. It is very hard to get through to us on the phone. And that is because we simply do not have enough call center staff. 2 years ago, we did an estimate, or we did an analysis, sorry, it was not an estimate, it was an analysis of how many calls we have coming in and how many people we have on the phone down to the minute. And we found out that if we wanted to answer 80% of our calls within 5 minutes, we would need 129 additional PINs. Last year, we asked for them. Last year, we received 25, which was great. We are now this year saying thank you. Can we have some more? So we were asking for another 25 PINs to help start making a dent in that challenge. You may recall that I was there too when unemployment had similar challenges during the pandemic. Last year, you probably know, you included 140 PINs in the budget for DOL to answer those calls. We similarly just need help with call center staff. And then our final request is for 3 additional attorneys to support the implementation and ongoing administration of the hotel rental tax that was established and the new DAGR-related appeals, the digital ads gross revenue. Those can now be appealed to the Hearings and Appeals Division per state law, and we don't have lawyers who can handle those appeals. We already have a several thousand case backlog. So I will respectfully submit those for your consideration and ask that you consider it. And that is all from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Comptroller. We have one more question from Delegate Beecham, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, the 25 pens, you didn't put a number on that. You asked for $2 million, like for the IT.
Sure, I have a number for you.
Okay.
It is, the cost of that would be $1.4 million in general funds.
Okay. And how about for number 3?
The 3 attorneys would be $366,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Delegate Beecham. Thank you again, Madam Comptroller, to you and your team. Appreciate it. I see no witnesses signed up for this agency, so that ends the budget hearing on the Comptroller's office. Very good to see you. Next, we will move to someone who is a very familiar face to this subcommittee. We'll move to DPSCS administration and offices. We will begin with our budget analyst, Mr. Josh Weinstock, followed by Secretary Carolyn Scruggs. Mr. Weinstock, whenever you are ready, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Weinstock, and today I'll be presenting the fiscal 2027 budget for the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, Administration and Offices. The 2027 governor's allowance decreases by $2.2 million, or less than 1%, to a total of about $255 million. I'll begin with a performance analysis, starting with recidivism, as you can see on Exhibit 1 on page 6. Recidivism rates represent the proportion of releasees that are returned to either the Department of Corrections or the Division of Parole and Probation, or DPP, following sentencing for a new criminal offense, a sentence of probation, or a return to custody from parole or mandatory supervision due to a violation of the conditions of release. As shown in Exhibit 1, of the individuals who were first released in fiscal 2022, 34% returned to incarceration or supervision within 3 years. This marks a 2 percentage point increase from the fiscal 2021 release cohort. The release cohort of 2017 is often used as a benchmark, since the pandemic had little impact on the cohort, and it was the first cohort where the Justice Reinvestment Act was mostly in effect. The fiscal 2017 cohort was 4.5 percentage points higher than the fiscal 2022 release cohort. Exhibit 2 on page 7 shows the breakdown of the fiscal 2022 release cohort's reasons for recidivism. 12% committed a new offense and received a new state sentence. 11% were placed on probation instead of being put in sentence custody, and approximately 10% of those released returned to custody due to a technical violation of supervision. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows one-year recidivism rates. Reporting on one-year recidivism rates was discontinued by the department beginning with the fiscal 2027 MFR submission. DPSCS should provide one-year recidivism data for the fiscal 2024 release cohort and discuss the reasons for discontinuing one-year recidivism data in its annual MFR submission. The next performance measure is contraband levels, as shown in Exhibit 4 on page 9. Overall contraband find occurrences across all search methods increased by 9% from fiscal 24 to 25. In fiscal 2025, weapons were the most frequently uncovered contraband at 45% of all fines. Weapon contraband remains at a high level, an increase of 82% over the past 5 years. Controlled dangerous substances, or CDS, were the second most common type of contraband found in fiscal 2025, totaling 31% of all contraband found. Of the 7 types of contraband listed, 6 categories increased in fiscal 2025. The department should explain the rise in weapons discoveries and outline the actions underway to curb weapon contraband within its facilities. DPSCS should also discuss metrics that it uses to clarify whether the increase reflects improved detection and enforcement efforts or an actual increase in contraband in circulation. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows the overall contraband level detected by the K-9 unit in fiscal 25. The level of contraband finds by the K-9 unit has dropped to a new low in fiscal 2025, to a level last seen in fiscal 2016. In the middle of page 10 is a discussion of the recent set of indictments announced by the Maryland Attorney General. Since 2023, the AG has announced 3 sets of indictments involving contraband and DPSCS facilities. The next measure is the Central Home Detention Unit population. As you can see in Exhibit 6 on page 10, the average daily CHD population has remained relatively constant since the pandemic, decreasing only slightly in calendar year 25 to 153 individuals confined to their homes, which is 55 individuals on average less than calendar year 2024. Finally, Exhibit 7 on page 12 shows a breakdown of correctional program participation. In fiscal 2025, there were nearly 5,500 participants in programming, mostly in education and evidence-based programming. The department indicated that due to a data error, the fiscal 2019 education participation was lower than what was reported in the MFR. When accounting for the revision, in fiscal 2025, program participation was still 44% less than the fiscal 2019 participation levels. DPSCS should comment on the reasons for the decrease in program participation and its efforts to engage incarcerated individuals. Moving on to the budget, administration and offices receives a total allowance of about $255 million. Exhibit 8 on page 13 shows agency spending by program. The Information Technology and Communications Division receives the most funds of any division at $65 million. And the second largest division is Administrative Services at $54 million, which includes HR, procurement, fiscal services, budget management, and several other offices. The $2 million budgeted decrease from the 26 working appropriation is broken out in Exhibit 9 on pages 14 and 15. Major decreases include $20 million in reimbursable funds in major information technology projects, including the Computerized Criminal History Project and the Electronic Patient Health Record Project. A $2 million decrease in cost allocations and a $1.3 million decrease due to the reduction in 10 contractual full-time equivalent positions. Major increases include $8 million in salary adjustments and $7 million in employee and retiree health insurance, as well as $2 million for the automated fingerprint system project. Turning to personnel on page 16, the allowance contains 1,320.8 regular positions, which is a net increase of 54 positions due to transfers from elsewhere in the department. Of these positions, the Intelligence and Investigative Division, IID, receives 30 of them, and the Deputy Secretary for Operations, DSO, receives 13 positions. The vacancy rate as of December 2025 was 10%, which is a decrease from the December 2024 vacancy rate, which was nearly 15%. A full breakdown of vacancies by division can be seen in Exhibit 10 on page 17. There are 4 issues discussed in this analysis. The first involves private home detention monitoring agencies. During bail review, judges can order electronic monitoring with ankle monitors of pretrial defendants. As of October 2025, there were 5 companies actively operating in the state. The Maryland Commission on Correctional Standards, or MCCS, is responsible for auditing private home monitoring agencies and overseeing the licensing process. Chapter 893 of 2024 requires private home monitoring companies to notify the court and the Division of Parole and Probation, or DPP, within 24 hours if an individual being monitored under home detention has violated a condition of their monitoring. Before the law was enacted, companies were only required to notify the court and DPP on the next business day after the violation. Last year, DPSCS announced that it was suspending the license of Advantage Sentence Alternative Programs, Inc., or ASAP. The suspension came after a DPSCS investigation that found that the company was not properly notifying the courts and DPP when an individual had broken a condition of their monitoring. Exhibit 11 on page 19 shows the number of individuals being monitored by private home detention monitoring agencies. In August 2024, ASAP was monitoring 160 individuals, which is about 25% of the total number of individuals being monitored. The state's largest private monitoring company, A1 Trusted Monitoring, received a letter of reprimand and was put on probation in 2022. The department should comment on MCCS's auditing procedures and standards for private home detention monitoring agencies, including the scope and frequency of reviews and identified compliance issues. DLS recommends restricting $100,000 in general funds pending submission of a report by September 15th, 2026, describing MCCS's oversight of private home monitoring detention agencies. The second issue begins on page 20 and highlights two major information technology projects that are behind schedule. The Computerized Criminal History Project, or CCH, will replace the outdated technology with a new criminal history database and web interface. CCH was first solicited as an on-premise solution. However, in the initial procurement process, DPSCS amended the solicitation to include a cloud-based solution. This caused vendors to drop out of the project, and the sole remaining vendor was awarded the contract. Before it could be approved, the department withdrew the contract and chose to restart the process to increase vendor participation. The second solicitation only received one response by the due date, causing the agency to push back the expected contract approval further. Ultimately, DPSCS decided to cancel the process in June 2024. The agency has now reported that it decided to pursue an in-house solution with oversight from the Department of Information Technology, or DOIT, and extended the procurement timeline by a year. More than 7 years after the beginning of the project, the expected completion is now set for calendar 2033. The project received $10.7 million in fiscal 2026 through a budget amendment, and the fiscal 2027 allowance includes about $900,000 in general funds from the IT Investment Fund. More information about CCH can be found in Appendix 3. The second project is the Electronic Patient Health Record Replacement, or EPHR. Since 2005, the department has relied on its legacy system to track and document medical information for managing the health care provided to offenders. The current system has inefficiencies and issues with connecting to external information systems. A contract to replace the EPHR system was previously approved in October 2020, but the vendor failed to meet its contractual obligations, prompting DPSCS to terminate the contract and issue a 2-year extension with the legacy vendor. DPSCS is now pursuing a replacement through an interagency cooperating purchasing agreement to leverage the National Association of State Procurement Officials, or NASPO, value point contracts. The vendor's draft schedule is 18 months, meaning the project will be completed after the Duval versus Moore consent decree expires, leading to potential legal risk. As of December, the department has not met its targeted date to onboard a vendor. The project did not receive funding in fiscal 2027 and is not expected to be completed until 2031. Language in the fiscal 2026 budget bill withheld $500,000 in general funds until the department submitted a report on the status to complete both the CCH and EPHR projects. DLS determined the report the department submitted to be in compliance with the language and recommends the release of $500,000 in withheld general funds. DLS also recommends restricting $250,000 pending the submission of a report by November 15th on the status of DPSCS's efforts to complete the projects. The third issue relates to the payment of outstanding medical bills to healthcare providers beginning on page 21. Several healthcare subcontractors were not paid fully for the services they provided under the previous healthcare contract with YesCare, which led the department to withhold final contract payments to the contractor. The department reported that it paid $2.8 million to 12 subcontractors with invoices that YesCare acknowledged as undisputed. DPSCS only paid undisputed claims and also indicated it did not pay hospitals or providers without written subcontracts, citing that doing so could be unlawful. DPSCS initially planned to withhold approximately $8 million in final payments to YesCare due to unresolved subcontractor invoices. The department subsequently paid $2.8 million directly to subcontractors for undisputed claims, and in June 2025, the department and YesCare resolved their contractual dispute through a settlement agreement where the department paid $10 million to YesCare, and YesCare acknowledged that the state had no outstanding past due obligations. The department should comment on how the payments to subcontractors factored into the final settlement payment to YesCare and how the final settlement was determined. Language in the fiscal 2026 budget bill withheld $100,000 until DPSCS submitted a report on the funds withheld from the medical care contract. Budget language also withheld $100,000 until the department submitted a letter confirming payment of outstanding bills to healthcare providers. Both the letter and report were submitted, and DLS determined the report and letter to be in compliance with the budget language and recommends the release of the $200,000 in general funds. DLS will process a letter to this effect if no objections are raised by the committees during the hearing. The final issue in the analysis discusses the recruitment efforts of correctional officers. Exhibit 12 on page 22 shows new hires for Correctional Officer 1 positions, which are entry-level positions. New CO1 hires increased from 401 in calendar 2024 to 673 in 2025, a nearly 68% increase. Exhibit 3 on page 23 shows a breakdown of how the department translated applications into interviews and then into new hires through the first 9 months of 2025. Among entry-level CO applications, nearly 13% were eventually hired. On the other hand, administrative positions received nearly 70% of all applications, but translated about 1% of those into new hires. The department has used several strategies to drive its recruitment efforts, including recruitment events and advertisements on social media, radio, and TV. They have also used a number of bonuses to encourage recruitment and retention. The new hire bonuses total $5,000. In 2025, nearly $12 million of new hire bonuses were dispersed. Specialty bonuses are used to fill skill gaps within the department. They are given to employees involved with things like internal investigations, field training, and special operations. $2.2 million in specialty bonuses were given out in calendar year 2025. And finally, retentional and longevity pay incentive are for employees who have worked longer than 20 years and who are eligible to retire. Nearly $6 million of these incentive payments were made to employees in 2025. Language in the fiscal 26 budget bill withheld $200,000 until the department submitted the second of 4 quarterly hiring and attrition reports to the budget committees. DLS determined these reports to be in compliance with the language and recommends the release of the funds. DLS also recommends restricting $200,000 in fiscal 2027, pending the submission of the second of 4 quarterly reports on hiring and attrition. Finally, turning to the recommended actions section on pages 25 to 30, DLS is recommending restricting $250,000 pending a report describing how the agency will minimize overtime spending, and another report restricting $250,000 pending a report regarding the department's oversight of its medical and mental health care contract. Both of these reports discussed in the overview analysis. Both of these reports were discussed in the overview analysis, but the recommendations appear under administration and offices. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weinstock, for very, very thorough analysis. And now if there are any questions from the subcommittee for our DLS analysts, cool. Seeing none, I'll welcome very familiar face to this subcommittee, Secretary Scruggs. Always good to see you. Welcome to your team. And you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, sir. Again, good afternoon, Chair Acevera, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having me again. My name is Carolyn J. Scruggs, and I'm the Secretary for the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today is Toyin Bakari, our Acting Deputy Secretary of Administration. As always, we want to thank Mr. Weinstein for his great work and the analysis that he presented on the department. Hopefully this time you do have my written testimony. So I hope to be brief and to let you know that we do concur with the recommended actions. I would also like to take a moment to clarify a few items regarding the recidivism reporting cited in the analysis. Since 2021, the department has produced detailed measurement of 3-year recidivism to measure public safety outcome post-release for state incarceration. Now that formal 3-year recidivism data is consistently available, the department aligned its MFR reporting to mirror the same calculations that were submitted in our JCR report to reduce confusion. Before 2022, the department's ability to report recidivism was affected by the migration of our primary data system. During that interim, a limited recidivism measure was provided through the MFR. This measured how many individuals returned from a new offense within a year. Compared to our 3-year recidivism measure, the previous MFR measure was inaccurate and underreported new offense recidivism because it was reported after 1 year or sooner. The overall recidivism rate and new offense recidivism rates are both now provided in the MFR. The Joint Chairman's recidivism report contains historical 1-year outcomes from 2016 to 2022. Regarding the modernization of the CCH system, significant progress has been made since we made the decision to fully shift to an internal modernization strategy for the CCH. The project initially experienced delays after 2 unsuccessful attempts to procure vendors in 2020 and 2022, and a failed engagement with IBM in April of 2025. After a comprehensive internal reassessment, we are utilizing our own ITCD programmers to update all 12 main systems. This has resulted in the Juve system being completed with the IDENT index system update scheduled to begin this April. This shift reflects DPSCS's commitment to owning the full modernization lifecycle and leveraging our internal subject matter experts to ensure accuracy, completeness, and long-term stability. I'm happy to report that we are on track to have all 12 of these systems completed by 2028. This shift also avoids $17 million in initial implementation costs and is projected to save about $4 million annually in maintenance costs. Lastly, as you know, the DPSCS initiated the process to replace the outdated EPHR system. We're currently working with DO-IT to complete a survey of several solutions in hope of finding one that can service multidisciplinary and multi-departments within the state. I also want to clear up that we are working with ACLU and our attorneys to possibly extend the Duval decree that would allow us to then become compliant with use of this system. In conclusion, the DPSCS, having grown an administrative workforce by 4.5%, our effectiveness and our oversight of vital functions has greatly increased, specifically in procurement, security operations, information technology, and our internal intelligence within our department. And I am happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Any questions of the subcommittee for Delegate Beecham?
Yes, I have one. I have a question about, it's regarding the electronic patient health record system. According to the budget documents, that system's been in place since 2005. And the budget documents also reference the need to upgrade the system that's been in place for the 21 years in order to meet the requirements of Duval versus Moore consent decree. The state knows they need to replace the system. It's my understanding that an award recommendation has been made by your department to a new vendor. And why has that award not been finalized given the urgency and the need to meet the consent decree and update the patient health records?
Thank you for that question. So several awards have been presented during that time period. However, the vendor that was used was unable to meet the customization needs and to make sure that they had all the security mechanisms in place because it is a correctional health system. And then one of the things that we've been able to do is we've been able to engage new talent within our information technology division. And that's why we decided to work with Do It this year and do a more modernized version of it, because we could save money, because we now have the talent on site that can help us build this. We had also most recently, we were working with IBM, and last April they again were unable to customize. So they were not able to meet what they signed up for in the RFP. So based on that, then that contract became a default.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Beecham. Madam Secretary, good to see you as always. Appreciate you and your team for being here. That ends the budget hearing on DPSCS administration and offices. We have one witness that's signed up to testify on the budget. I have Olawuson Dada, who is here. Welcome, sir. Did I pronounce your first name right?
More or less.
Welcome. Non-agency representatives have 2 minutes to testify whenever you're ready, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair and Chair members of the committee. My name is Oluwaseun Dada, and I'm a correctional officer sergeant with the Home Detention Unit and a proud member of AFSCME Local 3661. The Home Detention Unit supervises people who are finishing their jail sentences in their community. When someone becomes a danger to the public or breaks their condition, we return them to custody. Today, I'm here to talk about one urgent issue: staffing. Right now, our unit has 14 trained sergeants to cover the entire state of Maryland. That means a handful of officers are responsible for installing, monitoring equipment, responding to violations, making arrests, transporting people, checking homes, and covering emergencies 24 hours a day. The Home Detention Unit is severely understaffed statewide. Here are findings by recent report. At the time, we were working with 35 funded positions, but 11 of them are vacant, leaving only 24 officers to cover a 24/7 operation. The report also found that shortage forces intake freezes in parts of state, meaning that eligible individuals could not enter home detention at all, making the system less fair for the public and for people returning home. What will help is a better pay, so we can attract and keep qualified officers. Right now, we are losing good staff to higher paying agencies. Every vacancy means fewer people responding to emergency. This is not sustainable. We are asking the committee to support providing competitive wages for employees. The Home Detention Unit saves the state money by reducing jail crowding and gives people a real chance to succeed. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to the safety.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Just one question for you, Yoruba or Igbo?
I'm Yoruba.
All right. Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it. Definitely, we hear you, and we're going to work to ensure that we address staffing issues. All right? Thank you very much.
Yes,
appreciate it. And that ends the hearing on DPSCS administration and offices. Next, we will move to our judicial branch. We will begin first with our budget analyst, Mr. Scott Benson, followed by Chief Justice Matthew Fader and his team. Mr. Benson, whenever you're ready to begin, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Scott Benson, and I will be presenting the operating analysis for the Judiciary. The Judiciary is the branch of state government tasked with adjudicating legal disputes, interpreting, and applying the laws of the state. While the Judiciary's budget is submitted as part of the governor's budget, it is developed without executive branch oversight. Now, you can see in the operating budget summary on page 1, the fiscal 2027 budget increases by $67.1 million, or 8.4%, to $865.3 million. The use of general funds increases by $63.4 million, or 9% compared to the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. In December 2025, the Judiciary submitted its annual report on court performance measures, which compared data between fiscal 2024 and 2025. The data submitted by the Judiciary is a sample of all cases in the state, and the analysis of performance in the report is based on the sample data. So you can see in Exhibit 1 on page 6, processing times in the district court continue to improve for every track case type in fiscal 2025, except for traffic payable and civil small cases. The Judiciary has cited the transition to the Maryland Electronic Courts Case Management System, or MDEC, and changes to DUI and traffic must appear cases as a reason for the decrease in overall processing times. As shown in Exhibit 2 on page 7, the total number of cases heard by the district court increased in fiscal 2025 by 1,291 to 54,302 cases, with the largest increases being in civil large and civil small cases. Total circuit court cases, as shown in Exhibit 3 on page 8, increased by 131 in fiscal 2025 to 36,736 cases, with the largest increase being criminal cases, increasing by 515. The largest decreases was foreclosure cases, which decreased by 609. As you can see in Exhibit 4 on page 9, average case processing time decreased for all track case types except for child in need of assistance non-shelter cases. Only child in need of assistance shelter and termination of parental rights cases failed to meet the time standard. The Judiciary operates different types of courts referred to as problem-solving courts, or PSCs, which are designed to deliver justice for defendants that are facing certain circumstances that necessitate additional attention as part of a collaborative therapeutic system. As you can see in Exhibit 5 on page 11, circuit courts accounted for $7.1 million of the total $8.6 million cost to operate PSCs in fiscal 2025. The largest recipients of PSC funding in fiscal 2025 were Anne Arundel County and Baltimore City, which expended 10.6% and 9.3% of the program's total expenditures. The Judiciary currently operates 74 PSCs, an increase from 68 PSCs at this time last year. You can see in Exhibit 6 on page 12 that that adult drug courts are the most common PSC, totaling 28 in total. In Exhibit 7 on page 13, you can see drug courts receive $5.4 million, or about 70% of the total funding in fiscal 2025. Now, PSCs have 3 possible outcomes, the first being successful completion, the second being administrative discharge, and the third being unsuccessful completion. So you can see in Exhibit 8 on page 14, the number of successful completions total 406, or 57.8% of all program outcomes in fiscal 2025. This is while unsuccessful completions and administrative discharge comprise 24.1% and 18.1% respectively. Total served, which includes all participants whose cases remained open at the end of the fiscal year, including cases that started in the prior year, totaled 1,939 in fiscal 2025. Now, the Judiciary should discuss its annual goals regarding PSC outcomes and efforts being made to achieve them. In Exhibit 9 on page 15, you can see that trial courts, which include the district court and circuit courts, comprise 66% of the fiscal 2027 allowance, or about $567 million. The Supreme Court of Maryland comprises 2% of the allowance, or about $19 million, while the Appellate Court of Maryland comprises 2% of the allowance, or about $18 million. As you can see in Exhibit 10, starting on page 16, the largest increase in the Judiciary's fiscal 2027 budget is for personnel-related expenses, which overall increased by $40.4 million. Employee and retiree health insurance is the largest personnel increase and increases by $22.8 million. Additionally, the Judiciary's fiscal 2027 allowance includes a 1% merit increase for personnel. Outside of personnel-related expenses, some of the largest increases include a $5.4 million increase to local circuit courts to ensure all court proceedings have a security officer. Spending on district court security and building renovations increases significantly by $2.6 million. Funding for contractual staffing and related services increases by $6.6 million overall, with the largest increase in this category being $2.1 million for staffing costs associated with the Maryland Court Call Center as a new contract was procured. Now, every 4 years, the Judicial Compensation Commission, or the JCC, makes recommendations for potential increases to judicial compensation. The JCC recommendations must be introduced as a joint resolution in each House of the General Assembly by no later than the 15th day of the legislative session. The Commission met 3 times in December 2025 and January 2026, ultimately adopting the recommendation shown in Exhibit 11 on page 19. The recommendation increases judicial salaries by $5,900 per year, while also proposing a $7,500 annual stipend for the Chief Judge of the Appellate Court of Maryland, Circuit Court Administrative Judges, and District Court Administrative Judges. Now, due to the timing of the Judiciary's budget submissions before the Commission adopted its final recommendations, the fiscal 2027 allowance includes a placeholder amount that kept salary increases at the level previously recommended by the JCC. The placeholder totals approximately $6.6 million, while the current JCC recommendation requires approximately $4.4 million. As you can see in the personnel data on page 20, as of December 31st, 2025, the Judiciary had 246.3 vacancies, which includes 2 circuit court judges, 12 district court judges, 93.5 judiciary clerks, and 21 courtroom clerks. The fiscal 2027 allowance includes 51 new regular positions, of which 38 are contractual conversions of bailiffs in the district court. There are 3 new positions that are specific to the St. Mary's County Circuit Court. That includes a judge, a law clerk, and a courtroom clerk, and 2 new regular positions, including a judge and a courtroom clerk for the district court in Washington County. The Judiciary should discuss which positions have been vacant for over a year and efforts made to fill these positions. Turning now, Chapter 597 of 2021 established the Private Home Detention Monitoring Program, which allows an indigent defendant to remain in a private home as a condition of pretrial release. The program first went into operation in fiscal 2022 when $5 million in federal funds from the American Rescue Plan Act was provided to the Judiciary. As you can see in Exhibit 12 on page 22, the program had $175,787 in unspent funds in fiscal 2025. Exhibit 13 on page 23 shows the program's participation has remained between 607 and 706 participants between August 2024 and October 2025. Despite the consistent number of participants, program expenditures have varied greatly between months, largely due to the Judiciary's internal processes to verify the invoices received from the monitoring agencies. The Judiciary has found the management of the program to be challenging, as the duties and responsibilities associated with the program are not typically managed by the Judiciary. Some stability has been achieved as the Judiciary implemented funding guidelines requiring monitoring agencies to submit invoices within 60 days of the first monitoring, but invoices are still being received months after the service was provided. The Judiciary cites the continued inconsistent nature of invoice delivery as a reason why it is so difficult to accurately make projections for program expenditures. The Judiciary should comment on what actions are being taken to improve the operations of the Private Home Detention Monitoring Program. The Judiciary's major information technology development projects, or MITDPs, are funded through the Land Records Improvement Fund. This fund also provides funding for the Circuit Court offices, e-filing operations and maintenances, MD Land Rec, and electronic lands records online imagery operations and maintenance. Exhibit 14 on page 24 shows the total spending on MITDPs is expected to be $18.4 million in fiscal 2027, compared to the $21.4 million that was projected in December 2024 for fiscal 2027. This decrease is due to lower than expected expenditures for projects such as case management optimization, infrastructure modernization, and enterprise financial human resources system. As you can see in Exhibit 15 on page 26, the Judiciary's MITDPs have had a history of overestimating its required appropriations. The fiscal 2025 working appropriation included $19.7 million for MITDPs. However, the actual expenditures were $9.9 million lower than the working appropriation. On average, between fiscal 2016 and fiscal 2025, the Judiciary's MITDPs have spent $6.5 million less than the working appropriation. The judiciary should discuss the factors that have resulted in the MITDP overfunding since fiscal 2016 and efforts being made to better project anticipated funding. Now, Chapter 2 of 2007 expanded the use of the Land Records Improvement Fund to include the judiciary's MITDPs in both fiscal 2009 and 2010. The Budget Reconciliation Financing Act of 2010 required this fund to be the permanent fund for all the judiciary's MITDPs. So you can see in Exhibit 16 on page 27, the fund is projected to have a balance of $28.3 million at the end of fiscal 2026, after accounting for a $20 million transfer to the general fund. The fund balance is expected to decrease to a negative balance of $4.3 million by the end of fiscal 2028. Revenues are not projected to exceed $35.3 million between fiscal 2027 and 2030, while expenditures are projected to vary between $50.4 million and $53.3 million during the same period. Now, in calendar 2014, the Appointed Attorney Program began to ensure compliance with the Supreme Court of Maryland's decision in DeWolf versus Richmond. The program provides private attorneys to represent indigent defendants at initial appearances before district court commissioners. Data from fiscal 2025 shows that the full appropriation of $8.8 million was not fully expended, with $582,457 remaining unspent. Exhibit 17 on page 28 shows a breakdown of the program spending by judicial district. Exhibit 18 on page 28 shows the program participation has decreased from 17,249 in fiscal 2024 to 16,881 in fiscal 2025. The judiciary should comment on the factors impacting program participation. Now, starting on page 30, you can see the recommended actions. And the Department of Legislative Services recommends reducing $250,000 in general funds for postage expenses, reducing $2.5 million in general funds for district court contractual employee salary increases, reducing $200,000 in general funds for telephone expenses, reducing $150,000 in general funds for district court travel expenses, reducing $750,000 in general funds for printing expenses, reducing $400,000 in general funds for the Appointed Attorney Program, reducing $7 million in special funds for the judiciary's MITDPs, abolishing 3 new positions for the St. Mary's County Circuit Court, reducing $2.2 million in general funds to bring judicial salaries in line with the JCC recommendation, reducing general funds by $3.2 million, special funds by $164,842, and reimbursable funds by $37,319 to remove the 1% merit increase. Restricting the use of $8.2 million for the Appointed Attorney Program, and adopting narrative regarding the cost and utilization of the Appointed Attorney Program, narrative regarding the judiciary's annual performance measures, narrative for PSC performance and funding, narrative for judgeships needed in fiscal 2028, narrative on the status of the judiciary's MITDPs, narrative on the Land Records Improvement Fund balance, narrative on the private home detention program, and narrative on the judiciary's efforts to fill long-term vacant positions. Now, that concludes my presentation. I can take your questions.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Benson, any questions for our budget analyst, Delegate Kaiser?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Benson, my question to you may end up being passed along to the Chief Judge, but on pages 5, where you talked about district court clearance rates, and page 7, circuit court clearance rates, I didn't see anything about the appellate court or the Supreme Court. Is that data not offered, or was that just not part of this analysis?
That data wasn't part of this analysis. Off the top of my head, I can't recall if they published that data, but I think that would be a better question to direct to the judiciary.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Quick question for you, Mr. Benson. Looking at the analysis here, I'm noticing there's like an underspending on major IT projects. So it seems like fiscal year after fiscal year, there's an allotted amount, but what is being spent on IT projects falls short of that. Am I looking at that correctly?
Yeah, you're looking at that correctly.
And what's the reason for that, I guess?
I think the judiciary would be more. I think that the judiciary would be better at answering that question. That's why DLS included the bold text to have the judiciary answer it.
Gotcha. But I did see, right, there's an underspending on major IT projects, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Benson. At this time, I'd like to welcome up Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
My apologies. A follow-up question popped into my head while you were asking your question. Mr. Benson, on page 9, on the top, DLS recommends the adoption of committee narrative requesting a submission of a report on court performance measures. What other measures are you all talking about there?
So annually, the Judiciary doesn't submit MFR metrics like your typical state agency. What is done in order to get the Judiciary to report on their performance measures is annually they submit a report that they submit to DLS. It's within the DLS library, and that's what DLS relies on for monitoring their their case processing times or their total cases heard. So instead of MFR data, we rely on their reports, and that's why we included the recommendation to adopt the committee narrative.
You're not asking for any extra metrics?
No, nothing. Nothing extra compared to last fiscal year.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. Thank you, Mr. Benson. At this time, we will turn to Chief Justice Fader, Chief Judge Morrissey, and I have a Judy Rupp. Welcome, and you may begin when you're ready, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the subcommittee. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Mr. Benson, for that very thorough and thoughtful report, which was your inaugural attempt with the Judiciary. We appreciate that very much. And if I may take a moment of personal privilege, we're joined here today by a number of the elected clerks of court from the circuit courts around the state. May I introduce them? And I'd ask them just to stand when I introduce them. First, we're joined by David Capobianco, the Chief Deputy Clerk from Circuit Court for Dorchester County. And then we're joined by the Clerks of Court for the Circuit Courts for St. Mary's County, Deborah Birch, for Dorchester County, Amy Craig, for Washington County, Kevin Tucker, for Prince George's County, Mahassan El-Amin, for Frederick County, Sandy Dalton, for Kent County, Charisse Kennard. Thank you all for being here. So the Maryland Judiciary's mission is to provide fair, effective, and efficient justice for all. Last year, the Judiciary went through a process of identifying strategic initiatives to guide our spending as well as our operations for the next 5 years. And we have 5 strategic initiatives that guide that. First is promote accountability and public trust. The second is to improve access to justice. The third is to foster a healthy, diverse, and productive workforce. The fourth is to encourage a service-oriented approach to court operations. And the fifth is to use technology effectively and responsibly. And our budget is geared toward advancing all of those priorities. I want to mention just a few of the highlights of our budget and our report. And first, I want to express appreciation for Mr. Benson for including in the discussion our continued efforts to support Marylanders in need in many different ways. We are very proud of our problem-solving courts across the state. We have adult drug courts, we have veterans courts, we have mental health courts, we have truancy courts, all of which are very important in our ability to improve access to justice and to make the court system work where it best can. We also are very proud of our network of help centers, including self-help centers across the state to aid self-represented litigants, and also staffed centers that provide legal assistance to individuals who need it coming into court. All of that is critical to our mission to improve access to justice. One new element in our budget this year addresses a part of one of our priority items, which is improving the security that we provide for every single person who enters a court facility in the state of Maryland. And that is a $5.6 million grant program that would be available to local jurisdictions in order to meet minimum standards for providing security personnel in the courtroom. We had a task force that was authorized by the Wilkinson Judicial Security Bill that the General Assembly passed 2 years ago to investigate the security we have around our courts around the state. And one of the recommendations that they came up with was a minimum security standard where every single proceeding, every courtroom where a proceeding is taking place should have at least one court security officer in the courtroom. And proceedings involving an incarcerated individual or an individual who may be incarcerated as a result of the proceeding should have at least 2 court security officers there. We do not meet that standard in a lot of courthouses around this state. We do not meet that standard in most courtrooms hearing family matters in a lot of our largest jurisdictions. Family law matters are matters that often are the most contentious and out of which the most threats arise in our state. But right now, sheriff's offices, I should back up, the security that's provided in our district court around the state is provided by the judiciary. We are meeting that standard in the district courts. Security is provided in circuit courts through the sheriff's offices, one in each county in Baltimore City, and they get their funding mostly from the local jurisdictions. And many of them have a lot of vacancies. Three of those sheriff's offices have at least a dozen vacancies for court security officer positions, and they are not able to provide that security in the courtrooms. This fund would be a grant fund allowing those offices that are responsible for providing that security to seek grants to assist them in doing what they need to do in order to get their hiring up to the point where they can meet that security standard. Another element that is in our budget for the first time this year is funding of an artificial intelligence evidence pilot project. This would be a first of its kind in the country. The program was authorized by the General Assembly last year, and we're currently in the process of trying to put it together, but there's funding for the first time in the fiscal year 27 budget. This is a very important initiative in order to enable our courts to face what we expect to face, which is an increase in deep fakes produced by artificial intelligence coming into our courtrooms. We need to arm our judges with the capacity to identify the possible authenticity of this information when it's alleged to be fake. And we also need to arm them with the capacity to learn when something is real. This program would partner with an institute of higher education in the state in order to build the facility to provide expert recommendations on digital evidence that's disputed and whether it is or is not reliable. And that is a very important project for meeting the needs of artificial intelligence challenges that are coming to our court system. This budget includes funding for 51 new positions. 38 of those are not actually new positions, not actually new human beings, but they involve the conversion of lead bailiff pins from contractual positions to regular positions. District court bailiffs provide the security in all of our district court courthouses across the state. We could not function without them. Their status as contractual employees must have made sense at some point. However, without the bailiffs, we could not operate our district courts. Having our bailiffs, especially the lead bailiffs, as contractual employees hurts our ability to recruit and retain those critical individuals, and that puts us at a disadvantage. Converting these pins from contractual to regular positions is an important step in putting us in a more competitive position to provide security in our courthouses across the state. 2 new positions are associated with adding a district court judge in Washington County. Our judicial needs analysis that we do every year has identified a need for a new judgeship in Washington County for more than a decade. We haven't been able to fill that position or request that position because we haven't had a courtroom in which that person could work. Fortunately, we have a project now underway in order to provide that additional courtroom, and it will allow that court to be adequately staffed. 3 positions are associated with a request for a new judgeship in St. Mary's County. And you heard the DLS recommendation to abolish those positions. I'm going to address that further when we get to that point in responding to the DLS recommendations. But the other additional positions address other priority areas for the judiciary, including data quality analysts, a data integrity analyst, and a compliance analyst. The judiciary has recently embarked on a data excellence initiative to make sure that we collect all the data we collect, and we collect a lot of data in the course of handling cases, especially now that we have a unified electronic case management system fully deployed across the state. It's to make sure that all the data we collect is usable, useful, correct, accurate, and can be employed in order to do the analyses that we need to do to make sure that we are providing the best service for the people around the state and that external entities to the judiciary also rely on in order to guide their efforts. We also have funding for a behavioral health mapping and strategy lead and a behavioral health education coordinator. And these go to support our efforts that we've been undertaking in the last couple of years to improve the way that the state of Maryland as a whole addresses behavioral health issues in the justice system. The judiciary acted as the convener this past May for a statewide summit on behavioral health issues in the justice system that was very successful and very well attended with participation from every single jurisdiction in the state. And that has led to the creation of a statewide steering committee on behavioral health issues in the justice system that has already had its first 2 meetings and that is making good progress on trying to figure out how to bring all the stakeholders together, from the government, from private entities, from the hospitals, from the nonprofits, all the stakeholders in trying to address behavioral health issues across the justice system to make real progress in doing better in doing that. And those positions will help support that effort as well. So all of those positions are critical to our efforts to do more and better for the people of Maryland. I will now turn to addressing the recommendations that were made by DLS, and we'll start with Chief Judge Morrissey.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of this subcommittee. For the record, my name is John Morrissey, and I'm the Chief Judge of the District Court. I'll be addressing recommendations 1 through 6. With respect to recommendation 1, the judiciary accepts the recommendation. With respect to recommendation 2, and Chief Justice Fader kind of touched on this, it's a reduction in the salary that will be paid for the bailiffs. Since the inception of the district court in 1971, and for reasons that are really unknown or unknowable, district court bailiffs have always been designated as contractual positions despite the essential, full-time, and permanent nature of their employment with the court. These are not temporary positions, and dozens of bailiffs have been employed by the district court for 10 years or more. The bailiffs provide the physical security for 33 courthouses in the district court system, and they safeguard the judges, clerks, and the more than 2.4 million visitors that come to the district court annually seeking justice. They are all special police officers. They carry firearms. They're recertified annually, and they undergo bailiff-specific training. Over the last 5 years, security incidents have significantly increased in both numbers and severity. Just some of the incidents include the murder of Judge Andrew Wilkinson, an individual that fired more than 25 rounds of ammunition into the front of the Essex courthouse, an individual who threw a Molotov cocktail at the Catonsville courthouse, and a little more than a year ago, an individual that committed suicide after brandishing a firearm in the presence of more than 30 individuals, including members of the public, in the vestibule of the East Side Courthouse in Baltimore City. Last year, the governor gave a cost of living increase to state employees. The judiciary filed suit and gave a cost of living increase to its employees. When the budget amendment was received from DBM, it did not include any cost of living adjustments for the bailiffs. As a result, we requested a meeting with then Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management. The unique permanent nature of the bailiffs was discussed. The Secretary indicated to me that DBM does not allocate cost of living increases for contractual employees. It was suggested that a cost of living increase for bailiffs be included in the judiciary's operating budget this year, and it is. The issue of converting some of the more than 300 bailiffs that Chief Justice Fader mentioned to full-time equivalents rather than contractual employees was also discussed at the meeting with DBM. As a result of that discussion, the district court has requested that 38 bailiff contractual positions be converted to full-time equivalent. This represents the senior leadership. We have supervisors and then leads. A supervisor would be for the entire district. There's 12 districts. A lead would be in charge of each of the 33 courthouses. Recruitment and retention of bailiffs have been an ongoing concern for the district court, and the cuts proposed will make it even more difficult to provide adequate security in our district court courthouses. The judiciary actively recruits through job fairs and internet job listings and awareness campaigns to organizations like the Fraternal Order of Police, and has expanded its applicant pool to now include former military police as well as correctional staff that can become bailiffs. Despite these efforts in the several larger jurisdictions, the district court must supplement the bailiff staff with contractual security staffing. The bailiffs are an integral part of the district court mission. They're not contractual employees, but rather valued essential team members of the district court. They're willing to risk their lives for the safety of those that enter the judiciary courthouse. These cuts that have been proposed would negatively impact recruitment, retention for these critical positions, and for the safety of all the individuals who work at or the millions of citizens that come to the district court annually. We respectfully request that the subcommittee reject this reduction. If this reduction is adopted, the judiciary requests that the Chief Justice be authorized to allocate this reduction across the judiciary. With respect to recommendation 3, the judiciary accepts that recommendation. With respect to recommendation 4, the judiciary respectfully disagrees in part. The actual expenditures in this fiscal object for fiscal year 25 were $716,751. And the current request for 27 is only $736,821, resulting in a net difference of $20,070. The judiciary would concur to a reduction in this amount, which would be consistent with the DLS goal to limit expenses to the same as fiscal 2025. With respect to recommendation number 5, the judiciary accepts the recommendation to cut the printing amount. And with respect to recommendation 6, again, the judiciary respectfully disagrees in part. The appointed attorney program is required to fulfill, as you heard, a constitutional right for indigent defendants to have the opportunity for counsel at the initial appearance. The judiciary has leveraged technology to improve efficiencies and reduce costs for this program. One of the silver linings of COVID is we went virtual, and we've maintained that with the appointed attorney program. But the number of appointed attorneys is directly related to the number of arrests that are made each fiscal year, and this number can fluctuate based on police practices and other factors which are outside the control of the judiciary. A reduction in funding to actual expenditures on the front end does not leave room for expansion or additional coverage if needed. In addition, the judiciary agrees that it will revert any unused funds, so there's no risk if the program comes in under budget. The judiciary would concur to a reduction of $200,000 for this program in this category. And with that, I would turn this over to our State Court Administrator, Ms. Judy Roop.
Good afternoon. For the record, I am Judy Roop, the State Court Administrator, and I would like to speak. Thank you, sir. Recommendation 7 reduces the special funds made for the judiciary's major IT development projects by $7 million to align with fiscal 25 actual expenses. Since statutory authorization in 2015, the major IT development projects supported by the Circuit Court Real Property Records Improvement Fund has served as the dedicated funding source for the Circuit Court land record offices, land record technology systems, and IT initiatives supporting court access, case processing, land records integrity, and public service statewide. A reduction of $7 million in fiscal year 27 will likely delay or scale back mission-critical initiatives, including our statewide guardianship system, the problem-solving court tracking system, the expansion of text message notification regarding case milestones, the storage and display of digital evidence, the data archiving and digital recording system, and it will defer critical network and infrastructure modernization. These delays will extend reliance on aging systems and increase long-term risks. In response to the description of the major IT project funding as overfunded, we believe this does not represent the judiciary's fiscal management practices. While expenditures have historically come in below projections, these funds are not drawn unless needed. Conservative multi-year budgeting is essential for large, complex, enterprise IT projects. Between fiscal years 2016 and 2025, actual expenditures average $7.3 million below working appropriations annually. These variances reflect a 5-year budget horizon rather than excess spending. Forecasting assumptions, timelines, and cost projections are reviewed and refined through tracking, coordination between project and financial teams, and periodic reforecasting. In FY26, the General Assembly transferred $20 million from the Land Records Improvement Fund to the General Fund. As a result of this transfer, the fund balance is projected to reach a negative position by fiscal year 28, absent corrective action. A $7 million reduction in fiscal 27 will not resolve the structural imbalances, but will materially delay critical modernization efforts. The judiciary remains committed to continued collaboration with stakeholders to develop a sustainable, long-term funding strategy that supports our circuit court land records, offices, and preserves critical technology investments.
Thank you. And before I move on to recommendation 8, I will, Delegate Kaiser, you had asked about the appellate court's case processing data. We certainly have that and can send that on. I know for my court, for the past, I guess it's 12 years now, we've had 100% compliance with getting all of our opinions out in the term in which they are argued, meaning by the end of we have terms that are a year beginning on September 1st, and every opinion from a case heard in that term gets out by August 31st of the, which is the end of that term. We can get you that information. With respect to, do we questions now or later? Okay. Thank you. So with respect to recommendation 8, that is the recommendation to reduce by a little over $500,000 in general funds to abolish 3 new positions in the St. Mary's County Circuit Court. Those positions would be a new circuit court judge and 2 support positions to support the new circuit court judge. And the judiciary respectfully disagrees with that recommendation. And I want to explain a little bit about that. The judiciary traditionally has asked the General Assembly to authorize new judgeships only when the annual judicial needs assessment that we produce certifies a need for that judgeship. That methodology is based on an assessment of how long it takes statewide to handle different kinds of cases on average, and the number of those cases that are filed in each jurisdiction over the prior, we average it over the prior 3 years. We are currently using a model that was completed in 2017 with a partial update in 2022. This year, that assessment certified a need for 5 new judgeships. For a variety of reasons, including space limitations, we requested just one of those, the new district court judgeship in Washington County. 4 circuit court jurisdictions asked that we request additional judgeships, even though the model did not produce a certified need in those jurisdictions. Those are Queen Anne's County, Harford County, Charles County, and St. Mary's County. We are not requesting judgeships in 3 of those jurisdictions, and our budget does not include money for those 3. Each of those jurisdictions makes a good case for needing additional judicial resources, but the bar for the judiciary to make such a request when the judicial needs analysis has not certified that need is very high, and it's very high so that we maintain credibility with our requests to this body. Given the cases that those jurisdictions have made that they have needs that are not reflected in that analysis, we are undertaking a revision to our model. It's a process we normally do every 10 years. It's been 9, and we're going through that process, and that information will be available next year in connection with our judicial needs analysis, accounting for the substantial changes that have occurred with case processing in the last 9 years, including the rollout across the state of our electronic case management system. But the Circuit Court for St. Mary's County's request cleared our very high bar to make a request like this, because we can tell that there are data that show that the reasons for the increased workload in St. Mary's County are reasons that are not reflected in our judicial needs analysis. Perhaps most significantly, owing to policies in the Office of the State's Attorney in St. Mary's County, that circuit court's criminal jury trials increased more than 330% from calendar year 2019 to calendar year 2025. That's particularly significant because, as I mentioned, the model is not based on what happens after a filing is made in court. It's based on the number of filings and statewide averages of how long it takes for those filings to proceed. A case that goes to a jury trial obviously takes a lot more time and resources of the court than the same filing that results in a plea agreement. And that is why we believe there is a demonstrable increase in the work of that court that is not reflected in the needs analysis that we perform. St. Mary's County has also seen a 62% increase over the same period in family law merits hearings, which similarly, that is not accounted for in the model that's used. And as a result of that, that court has an increasing backlog of cases such that it now apparently takes a year to get a hearing on many issues in family law cases and other civil cases. The processing time for criminal cases can't go too far because of speedy trial requirements, but that has created a huge burden on civil cases where it takes too long to get a hearing because of inadequate resources. And for that reason, we would respectfully disagree with the recommendation not to fund a new judgeship in St. Mary's County. The recommendation 9 is to reduce by $2.172 million in general funds for the purpose of providing judicial compensation enhancements. We agree with that recommendation. As Mr. Benson indicated, the numbers we put into our budget were a placeholder because we didn't know what the Compensation Commission would come up with, but we agree with that recommendation. Recommendation 10 is to reduce by a little over $3 million in general funds and additional special funds and reimbursable funds to eliminate the 1% merit increase for personnel, and the judiciary accepts that department recommendation. Recommendation 11 is to provide that $8.2 million of the appropriation made for the purpose of providing attorneys under the appointed attorney program should be in a special fund, and although the judiciary believes that we would benefit from a more flexible approach to that, we nonetheless accept the department's recommendation for the restriction of those funds. Recommendations 12, 13, 14, well, 12 through 19 are to adopt the following narratives in order to provide reports, and the judiciary accepts all of those recommendations to provide those narratives. Turning to the issues, the first issue is funding for private home detention increases, and I'll turn the microphone back over to Chief Judge Morrissey to address that.
Actually, I'm going to do that. I'll respond to the questions regarding the private home detention monitoring program. As the program transitioned from $5 million in federal ARPA funds to full state funding in fiscal '25, the judiciary has been responsible for fiscal oversight. For fiscal year '26, the $3.2 million working appropriation is projected to be sufficient based on current participation levels. We were asked to comment on actions being taken to improve operations of the private home detention monitoring program. And as noted in the budget package, the judiciary did not select the private home detention monitoring agencies and does not supervise their operations. Those responsibilities rest with the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Nevertheless, the judiciary diligently manages the payment function assigned to it by annually executing detailed memorandums of understanding with the agencies. We maintain regular written and verbal communication with the agencies to improve billing, timeliness, and clarity. The Administrative Office of the Courts, in coordination with local courts, stabilized the payment process by verifying each invoice against case file documents before payment is issued. While invoices from monitoring agencies often contain errors and are received beyond the due dates, the judiciary developed and maintains a detailed internal dashboard to track enrollment, costs, and projections. It's important to note that administering third-party vendor payments is not a traditional judicial function. Court staff must research case files to validate invoices, diverting time from core court operations. For that reason, the judiciary supports the ongoing evaluation of administrative responsibilities by the Justice Reinvestment Act Work Group and the Home Detention Monitoring Work Group, and we support consolidating these efforts to promote efficiency and accountability. Finally, the judiciary accepts the recommendation to continue to support quarterly status reports. The next issue outlined in the budget analysis package is the major IT project funding. As previously mentioned, while expenditures have historically come in below projection, these funds are not drawn unless needed. Conservative multi-year budgeting is necessary for large, complex enterprise IT projects. To improve the accuracy of future projections, the judiciary has strengthened IT project oversight with required project status before the Major Projects Committee, as well as conducting more frequent internal status reviews to identify potential project delays sooner. These steps are designed to narrow the gap between appropriated and actual expenditures while preserving the flexibility necessary to manage large, multi-year technology initiatives responsibly. Chief Judge Morrissey?
And finally, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the last issue is issue number 3, requesting the judiciary to comment on the factors impacting the appointed attorney program participation. Kind of mentioned that a little bit in one of the recommendations before. The decrease in invoices from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25 occurs for several reasons. First, as I mentioned before, the number of participants in the program is linked directly to the number of arrests made by police. That number can vary from year to year. Second, fiscal year 2024 was a leap year, and I know that sounds like only one day, but that can represent 50 invoices or shifts across the state on any given day. Districts 9 and 10 were combined as part of our efficiency program in December of 23, so there were more attorney shifts for the first half of fiscal 24 in these 2 locations. Additionally, attorneys were not submitting invoices timely in fiscal 23, and these invoices were included in the number of invoices pushed into fiscal 24. Finally, attorneys were submitting multiple shifts on one invoice, which has been corrected in fiscal 25 to more accurately reflect the number of shifts scheduled with invoice submissions. The judiciary agrees with the recommendation of submitting the report for the appointed attorney program, as it always has, and also agrees with Mr. Benson's recommendation for releasing the general fund's money withheld last session. Thank you for your patience with our testimony, and that would conclude the testimony.
There were
Two comments. I apologize. That concludes my part of this. Sorry about that.
So there were 2 comments requested. The first comment was the judiciary should discuss its annual goals regarding problem-solving court outcomes and efforts being made to achieve them. So as I mentioned at the outset, the judiciary is very proud of our treatment courts, which do tremendous work in helping people get their lives back on track in ways that promote accountability, public safety, and community health. The judiciary's annual goals for improving problem-solving court participant outcomes focus on continuous program monitoring to strengthen adherence based on nationally recognized evidence-based best practices. These are not programs where you expect to see a 100% successful completion rate. The issues that the participants in these programs are facing just don't work like that. Continuous program monitoring enables the judiciary to identify specific areas of improvement for each program, followed by targeted technical assistance, guidance, and corrective strategies. When compared to national benchmarks, our programs perform significantly better than average when it comes to successful completion rates, as identified in the table in our written response. All of Maryland's adult drug court and veterans treatment courts follow Maryland adult drug court performance measures and all rise best practice standards for identifying and admitting individuals. Since fiscal year 2022, Maryland's adult drug courts have been assessed and monitored for adherence to national best practice standards using the Treatment Court Best Practices Self-Assessment Tool. Regular assessments have been conducted to ensure continued alignment with these standards, resulting in a significant statewide adherence increase from 76% in fiscal year 2022 to 89% at the most recent evaluations. Adherence to those national standards is designed to increase program completion rates and reduce recidivism. These and other efforts are aimed at enhancing the effectiveness of these specialized courts, improving participant outcomes, and addressing challenges that may lead to unsuccessful program completions. Overall, the judiciary's adherence to national best practices, the adoption of validated risk and need screening tools, and ongoing assessments and training are key measures in improving outcomes. And for the final comment requested, I'll turn it back over to State Court Administrator Roop.
So the judiciary was asked to discuss which positions have been vacant for over a year and efforts made to fill the positions. The judiciary is proud to report that its vacancy rate has ranged from 4.28% to 5.48% in fiscal 25, reflecting sustained and strategic workforce management. So we are at the sweet spot. Of the 4,173 regular positions, 239 are vacant. Only 24 positions above the turnover and necessary vacancies already built into the judiciary's budget. Notably, a significant portion of these vacancies are judgeships, which are filled through appointment by the Office of the Governor of Maryland and are outside the judiciary's direct hiring authority. Since December 31st, 2025, 2 circuit court judges and 1 district court judge have been appointed, further strengthening judicial capacity. While certain positions have been vacant, for more than 1 year, many reflect deliberate, strategic staffing decisions, funding alignment, or timing considerations rather than recruitment challenges. These vacancies do not materially impact court operations and are consistent with prudent budget management. The judiciary appreciates the recommendation to provide greater detail regarding long-term vacant positions and will submit a comprehensive report by July 1st, 2026. We welcome the opportunity to demonstrate that our low vacancy rate is a result of careful planning, active recruitment, and responsible stewardship of public resources. This concludes the judiciary's requested comments, and we respectfully welcome any questions the committee may have.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Chief Justice Fader, Chief Judge Morrissey, and Judy Rupp for those responses. I'll now turn to the subcommittee. Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Chairman Acevero. To the Chief Judge, when I had asked the question earlier of the budget analyst about the timing of Supreme Court and appellate court cases, you did in your testimony about 10 minutes ago share the Supreme Court timing. You did not, however, answer the appellate court timing, so I wanted to ask about that, and then I probably have a follow-up question.
And the only reason is because I don't know exactly what the numbers are. Ours is easy, 100% compliance with our time standard, but we can certainly get you the number. The appellate court's time standard is to have 90% of their cases out within 9 months and 100% out within a year. And I just don't have the exact percentage for you as far as meeting that standard.
Wait, I just want to make sure 90% in
9 months.
In 9 months, 100% out in a year. So would it surprise you that the case that my wife did in January of 2024, 25 months ago, still has no decision?
That should not happen under their standards. And I know that their compliance is not 100%, but I don't have the specific percentage. But I know that they do have some cases that have been longer than that standard, and I know that they are working very hard on trying to meet that.
I mean, given that you first said 100%, any thought on how to reduce the timing between cases and decisions? I can't imagine she's the only one.
I have some thoughts and have been in discussions with our chief judge about making sure that they get into compliance with that standard, and I'm confident that they will.
Okay, my understanding is they have a lot of unreported decisions that are quite long, which seems to take a lot of time. So it's just, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you very much, Delegate Kaiser. Any other questions of the subcommittee? All right. Chief Judge Morrissey, quick question. I am now returning to PSA. You and I have had discussion over the years around expungement, partial and full expungement. What update can you provide to ensure those individuals who are eligible for expungement are able to request that is able to happen in a timely manner and folks aren't necessarily being held back by a record?
Thank you, and that's a great question, Mr. Chairman. We did send over to you, when we met several weeks ago, we sent over to you a list of the legislation that has been implemented since 2008. There's over 20 some odd bills that have passed since 2008, particularly in acceleration since 2015. In fact, there was 5 in 2015, 2 in 17, 2 in 18, 2 in 19, 4 in 21, 1 in 22, 1 in 23, I'm sorry, 3 in 23, 1 in 24, and 1 in 25. And we've been able to successfully implement all of those that you have. And we do appreciate, I know at times we've asked for your patience while we develop the technology and build the infrastructure necessary to do these type of things. I can tell you for fiscal 25, if you remember in 21, one of the bills was a major one. It was to expunge any favorable outcome of a case that had there's a 3-year time frame for the release and the claims. So you guys told us starting in the beginning of 24, anyone that goes back to 21, if they had an acquittal, a null pros, a dismissed, or a not guilty, we were to expunge all those cases automatically. No one had to file a petition on that. And I'm proud to report that in fiscal 25, which only represented 9 months because it started August 1st of 2024, we processed more than 117,000 automatic expungements of case records. No one had to ask for it. We did it. We have a team in Dorchester of 8 clerks that do nothing but this with the supervisor. So there's 9 individuals, and I strategically placed it in Dorchester because the economy in Dorchester, in my opinion, could use some help. It also creates a pipeline of advancement through the judiciary, so these clerks can then move up to other positions throughout the judiciary. So on average, there's been more than in addition to those 117,000, there were over 48,000 other petitions through the various other bills that you all have had that people petitioned the court and that we've handled during that same fiscal year period. So over 155,000 expungements were granted. So you can see the level that we're doing on these things. Just in the last 6 months, we've averaged more than 15,000 automatic expungements and over 3,500 regular petition expungements, and we stand prepared to implement whatever it is. We always have suggestions about the wording on some of the bills because depending on how the bill is worded can make it more difficult or less difficult for us to implement. The more logic that we have to apply to it, the greater the cost is associated with the implementation of it.
Gotcha. And these are folks who are notified. You had mentioned a few minutes ago that these are folks who hadn't applied for expungement, but you all went ahead and did it anyways. Were they notified of that after the fact?
They were. So when someone comes into court and has a favorable outcome, right, their case is null pros. We tell them there and give them information about how, if they don't want to wait the 3 years, they can just walk right, and I say it in every one of my verdicts, I say you can walk right across the hall right now and file the paperwork and you'll get your expungement that way, or you can wait 3 years. It's part of the law. You can wait 3 years, and we do that. Once the 3 years comes up, we send out notices to, part of the manual part of this is we have to look at each case file and determine who touched that file, not the judiciary, but state's attorneys, public defenders. Those are pretty common in most of them, but if it was a private attorney, Department of Corrections, CJIS, all those different people that come into it, and we send notices out to everyone on there. And everyone that is, if we have a good address still, 3 years later, they're getting that notice.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I know through Mr. Benson's report, there's the court performance that's provided for district and circuit court. There's also appellate, and then I think we passed legislation creating the Maryland Supreme Court. Do we still? Well, we had the Court of Appeals, and now it's the Maryland Supreme Court, right? Can that information be provided for the appellate court as well, in terms of like court performance, not just district and circuit, but appellate as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And so how do we, I guess, if you all could sort of lay out a vision, how do we get appellate courts to essentially, in terms of performance, get to a much higher rate, like a 90% rate within a few months versus 100% in a year?
Well, that is a very high volume court, and we have thought that I mean, most of their cases do get out faster than that, and we have statistics on the average length of time to get an opinion out. So the median would be a lot shorter than 9 months, but there are some cases that are just a lot more complex and that take more time in order to resolve. And that's certainly some of the cases that get more toward that 9 months or a year. And then, of course, there are the ones that we're really trying to rein in to get within that so that they do have eventually 100% compliance with that. But I think that most of the ones that take longer are addressed to the nature of the cases that are not as easy to get the decision out. Gotcha. And they also, of course, some of their cases have not just the majority opinion, but they might have a separate opinion written by somebody who's concurring or dissenting, and that takes time as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions from the subcommittee? All right, seeing none, thank you, Chief Justice Fader, Chief Judge Morrissey, Ms. Judy Rupp, and to all the clerks, court staff, everyone who showed up for this budget hearing. It is much appreciated. Have a great evening, and that ends the budget hearing for Judiciary and the budget hearing for PSA. Thank you all.